Chapter 1655. Yun Qinli was a little puzzled. Earlier, she seemed to have seen the air conditioning on the dashboard display. Did he turn it on purpose? She had her suspicions. Mu Yaja had originally booked the West Lake Thai restaurant, which was located in the One by Villa Hotel. It was considered a high-end restaurant. Although it could only be considered high-end, the dishes in the restaurant were sumptuous and delicious. After stabilizing the car, Yun Shishir helped Yun Yeching out of the car. As for Yun Yeho, he was naturally carried out of the car by Mu Yaja, who then pushed his wheelchair into the hotel. At first, Yun Yeho was a little restless and politely declined the offer. From their first meeting, he could tell that this man was of noble status. He was either rich or powerful, so he felt somewhat flattered to have him push his wheelchair. Mu Yaja, however, simply said, "You're not in good health, so just sit still. You don't have to worry about anything else." Hearing this, Yun Yeho did not say anything else. His flushed face showed that he was in a good mood. Yun Shishir snickered when she saw this. This fellow is quite good at doing things. Inside the hotel, the restaurant manager naturally did not dare to delay the arrival of a distinguished guest. He led the waiters to line up at the entrance to welcome him. The lobby manager could not hide his joy and excitement when he saw Mu Yaja. He immediately went up to him and was about to greet him when Mu Yaja stopped him in time. "Don't make a fuss. I'm just here for a meal." In other words, he hoped that the man would keep a low profile and not address him as Chairman Mu, lest he was bluffing. The lobby manager kept quiet when he heard this. Naturally, he understood the underlying meaning of his words and nodded with a smile. "Chairman Mu, the private room is ready for you. This way, please." Even though he was told to keep a low profile, he still had to address him as Chairman Mu. Otherwise it would be breaking the rules. He gave the waiter beside him a look, and the latter immediately stepped forward to help Mu Yaja push the wheelchair into the elevator. The elevator in the hotel was not big, so when Yun Shishir stepped inside, it was already overloaded. Seeing this, Yun Qingyao giggled. "Shishir, why don't you walk up? It's only the 5th floor anyway." Yun Shishir nodded. "All right. Then I'll walk up. You guys enter the private room first." Just as the elevator doors were about to close, Mu Yaja suddenly stepped out. Yun Shishir was stunned. "What are you doing?" Behind him, Yun Qingyao and Yun Qinli were puzzled. Why are you going out? There's still room for one more." Mu Yaja ignored the people behind him. He lowered his head and glanced at Yun Shishir. He reached out, took her hand and interlocked his fingers with hers. "I'll go with you." Yun Shishir blushed and said in a low voice, "Why didn't I realize you were so clingy?" Behind them, Yun Qingyao's expression changed. She wanted to say something, but the elevator doors had already closed. In the narrow space, Yun Qingyao was obviously in a bad mood. Her mother glanced at her and chided, "What's wrong with that long face?" "Nothing." Yun Qinli suddenly asked Yun Yeching out of curiosity, "Uncle, what's the background of Shishir's boyfriend? I saw the lobby manager treating him very politely just now. It's as if he's very powerful, calling him Chairman Mu, in a very flattering manner." Chapter 1656. Yun Yeching let out a dry chuckle but did not reply. His mother, however, interjected from the side. "Brother Cheng, since he's Shishir's boyfriend, I think you should really find out more about him. Shishir is so young and pretty. If she gets abducted by some unknown rascal, you'll have a lot to cry about." "That's right. Uncle, you should find out more about him." Yun Qingyao chimed in from the side. Yun Yeho, who was in his wheelchair, clicked his tongue and reprimanded, "Why are you poking your nose into other people's business? He's Shishir's boyfriend. Why are you all so concerned about him?" "Yun Yeho, what's wrong with you today? Why are you always pouring cold water on me?" His wife retorted in dissatisfaction, unwilling to be outdone. Yun Yeching tried to smooth things over. "Oh dear. Today is a rare happy day, let's not bicker." Yun Yeho kept quiet when he heard that. His wife snorted and muttered something under her breath. Her voice was so low that no one could hear what she was saying. Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir soon arrived at the private room. However, before the two could take their seats, Yun Qingyao asked Mu Yaja curiously, "I heard them calling you Chairman Mu earlier. Are you a big boss?" Yun Shishir furrowed her brows in discomfort. Why is this woman paying so much attention to Mu Yaja right from the start? She cast a sidelong glance at a certain man, but her brows relaxed. It was not surprising, though. After all, this man was a magnet for bees and butterflies. Putting aside his handsome looks and impressive family background, just his noble aura alone was enough to move one's heart. He was indeed not someone to be worry-free. Mu Yaja looked up at Yun Qingmiao. Initially he wanted to ignore her, but with so many pairs of eyes watching, he could not appear too cold. Hence, with a smile, he said casually, "Everyone in this hotel calls me boss." Yun Qingmiao had a feeling that he was hiding something. Just as she was about to question him, Xiangyu beat her to it. "I heard the lobby manager calling you Chairman Mu earlier." "I still don't know your name, so can I call you Xiao Mu?" Mu Yaja nodded. Xiangyu smiled in satisfaction. Yun Shishir, on the other hand, snickered. "Xiao Mu?" This title really made one not know whether to laugh or cry. If all of Dixing's subordinates knew that their boss outside, they would be in the wind, Yun Yeho quietly sized him up and exclaimed in admiration, "Xiao Mu, you're really tall and handsome. Plus you're very polite too." Xiangyu added, "That's right. To be able to find someone like Xiao Mu, there must be smoke rising from your ancestors' graves." Yun Shishir frowned. Her aunt's words were inappropriate and should not be said in front of so many people. However, after thinking about it, she did not pursue the matter. She heard that this auntie had not studied for many years and was not particular about her speech, so she could only let it pass. Yun Yeqing, on the other hand, remained silent. From the moment Mu Yaja entered the room, he had been sizing him up without a word, as if he were facing a formidable enemy. Today, when he returned to the capital, he did not expect that a prospective son-in-law would appear out of nowhere. This caught him a little off guard. Thus he had yet to digest it until now. Chapter 1657. As they exchanged pleasantries, the dishes were served one by one. Everyone chatted as they ate. For some reason though, Yun Shishir had a feeling that the topic at the table revolved around Mu Yaja. Even though Mu Yaja was unwilling to pay attention to it, he still maintained a courteous look on his face. She asked, "Little Mu, how old are you this year?" Mu Yaja answered, 28. She exclaimed, "Oh dear. I really couldn't tell at all. I thought that you're only 22 years old today. That means that you've already had some aspirations of entering society." Mu Yaja answered, "I started working when I was 20. She lamented, "Does that mean that you didn't make it to university?" Yun Qingli replied, "Sigh. I didn't go to university either. I got in but I couldn't afford the tuition fee, so it was delayed." As she spoke, she did not forget to secretly shoot a resentful glance at her father and Yun Shishir. Yun Shishir, who was busy taking care of her father, did not notice her sister's gaze. Mu Yaja answered, "I did go to university, but I finished all my studies when I was 19. Her eyes widened in shock. "Which university are you from?" Mu Yaja answered, "Stanford." Her eyes widened. "Why are you tearing up the blanket?" Mu Yaja patiently answered, "Stanford." She frowned. "I've never heard of that university." Yun Qingli, who was standing at the side, felt a little embarrassed and quickly tried to smooth things over. "Mom, he's talking about Stanford, a very famous university in America." "Stanford. I see." She rubbed her hands together uneasily, clearly feeling a little embarrassed. Yun Yeho suddenly said, "Shishir, you should be 23 years old today, right?" Yun Shishir looked up and smiled. "Uncle, you must have remembered wrongly. I'm 24 this year." 24? Yun Yeho slapped his forehead. "Oh dear. I remembered your birthday wrongly." At the side, Yun Yeqing said, "Have you forgotten? When you came over, Shishir hadn't even gone to college yet." Yun Yeho said, "So, Shishir, you're a year older than Qingli. Qingli should call you big sister." Yun Qingli was surprised. "Shishir, you're older than me by a year. What a blunder. Sister Shishir, I'll have to call you sister from now on." Soon the topic was back on track. Alas, the two sisters still paid more attention to Mu Yaja. From time to time they would ask questions such as, "Do you have a house in the capital? Do you have siblings? And what are your parents' jobs?" Mu Yaja answered them one by one. However, he didn't answer in detail. Yun Qingmiao, on the other hand, was calculating in her heart. Good family background, a house in the capital, a stable job and a high income. He's a pretty good man. Who knows, he might even be a novice. After all, the watch on his wrist can't be fake. His family must be very rich to be able to afford a million-yuan watch. Yun Qingmiao took another look at Yun Shishir and secretly sized her up. It was no wonder she could find such a good man. She's good-looking, sweet and knows how to coax people. Such a personality is the most pleasing to men. Yun Shishir could only feel her sister's piercing gaze on her, which made her feel a little uncomfortable for a moment. He was also secretly calculating in his heart. It seemed that he had to arrange another place for them to stay. Chapter 1658. It was better not to bring relatives over for the time being. They would start gossiping again if they saw the two children at home. She could not be bothered to deal with them. She was not afraid of getting pregnant out of wedlock. Rather, she was afraid that this auntie and her two sisters would say something hurtful in front of the children. Even if it was unintentional, she would not allow it. Hence, after dinner, Yun Shirshir decided to arrange for them to stay in a hotel for a few nights. She would make proper arrangements for them once she found another place to stay. Driving to the hotel, she arranged 2 rooms for her mother, Yun Qingmiao and Yun Shirshir. The latter asked curiously, Why are we staying in a hotel? Mom, the housing prices in the capital are so expensive. Sister Shirshir's house is small and can't accommodate so many people, so she arranged for us to stay in a hotel first, said Yun Qingli. Her mother smiled at that. If you ask me, the capital isn't as comfortable as our hometown. There are so many rooms back home, it's the same for all of us. The housing prices in the city are indeed frighteningly expensive. Yun Shirshir could only say, Auntie, Sister Qingmiao and Qingli, let's just make do for tonight. I happen to be free tomorrow, so I'll bring you guys to look at the houses and arrange for your accommodations before making other arrangements. Her mother nodded but suddenly asked, How much does a night in a hotel cost? I don't have much money on me. She had a bank book with her, and it contained tens of thousands of yuan that her father had returned to her. She could not bear to spend it, so she deliberately said that. Yun Shirshir said politely, I've already paid for your rooms, so you guys can stay here without worries. After leading them to their respective rooms, Yun Shirshir was finally able to leave. She then drove the 2 back to Xiangdi Walk. Along the way, Yun Yeho dozed off in the backseat. He was indeed tired from the long journey. Yun Yeqing, on the other hand, was not sleepy. Taking advantage of his brother's nap, he sat in the front passenger seat and suddenly turned to ask, Shirshir, how far have you gone with him? Dad, what do you mean by that? Have you slept with him? Yun Yeqing paused for a moment before asking bluntly, Did you sleep together? Yun Shirshir blushed. After a moment of silence, she nodded awkwardly. Yun Yeqing's face turned ashen when he heard that, but he could not bear to reprimand her. Instead, he sternly said, Shirshir, it's not that Dad wants to chide you. You're too muddle-headed. You haven't gotten married and you haven't even gotten your marriage certificate. It's not right for you to be living together. Dad, it's not that Dad doesn't know some things. He's just pretending not to know. I know very well who that man is. Yun Yeqing suddenly said in a deep voice, his eyes full of meaning. Yun Shirshir looked at him. Dad, what do you mean? Yun Yeqing did not intend to hide it from her and went straight to the point. He's Yu Yu's biological father, isn't he? How did you know? Yun Shirshir turned pale with fright. Yun Yeqing did not know whether to laugh or cry as he asked, Do you really think that Dad's eyesight is bad because of his old age? Who would believe that he's not Yu Yu's father when he's standing next to him? Yun Shirshir was speechless. How could she have neglected this point? In fact, Muyaja and Yu Yu did resemble each other, but, sigh. Chapter 1659. Shirshir, you're not young anymore. There are some things that I shouldn't say to you anymore. You should know better. If you two have already registered your marriage, I won't interfere with your marriage. Who knows if he's sincere to you, though? In today's society, a man's heart is like a needle at the bottom of the ocean. You may think that he's sincere to you, but it's hard to tell. Who knows if he'll be the one you'll end up spending the rest of your life with? Her father's words were well-intentioned and persuasive, but each of them was like a gem. Yun Shirshir bit her lower lip as she stared ahead with her hands on the steering wheel. It was not unreasonable for him to say that. She could empathize with his concerns. As a father, it was understandable for him to be worried that his daughter would be cheated by an outsider. It was just that he did not know Muyaja well, so it was understandable for him to have such worries. He said, After registering your marriage, I won't be able to control what happens between the two of you. However, before you register your marriage, you have to be mindful of your chastity, so you're not allowed to live with him until then. Do you understand? Yun Shirshir nodded her head. Also, I have a question that I want to ask you personally. Answer me honestly. Yun Shirshir replied, Go ahead, Dad. Do you really like that man? Or is it because you've given birth to his child that you're willing to make do with him? If it were the latter, he might not agree to it. A marriage made for the sake of a child would not be a happy one. He wanted her to be happy and healthy. That was enough for him. He did not ask for riches or fame. All he wanted was for her to be able to choose the man she loved and spend the rest of her life in bliss. At the traffic light junction, she stepped on the brakes and turned to look at him seriously before nodding her head solemnly. The car stopped in the garage. As Muyaja walked over, he could feel Yun Yeqing's vigilant gaze on his back, which was like a prick. He turned to look at Yun Yeqing, only to see the latter regain his composure in an instant. Muyaja didn't think too much about it and carried Yun Yeho to the wheelchair. At the side, Yun Yeqing reminded her repeatedly, "Be careful," Muyaja said, "Don't worry, I can handle it." Yun Yeqing nodded, but his mind seemed to be elsewhere. When they entered the house, Yu and Xiao Yichen heard the commotion and rushed to the door enthusiastically, only to be stunned when they saw Yun Yeqing and Yun Yeho, whom they had never met before. "Grandfather, who is this?" Yu asked in surprise. Yun Yeqing was equally surprised to see another tall child standing beside Yu. This child looked similar to Yu. He stared blankly for a moment before he suddenly reacted. Back when Shirshir was a surrogate mother for the Muse, she was pregnant with twins. However, 7 years ago Yu stopped breathing when she was born. The Muse came and took away the other child, leaving behind the missing Yu. This child was probably the other healthy child. Xiao Yichen looked at Yu, then at Yun Yeqing and finally at Yun Yeho in the wheelchair. Chapter 1660. Xiao Yichen was also quick-witted and had a sweet tongue. Hence, he followed Yu and enthusiastically called him Grandpa. This greeting almost melted Yun Yeqing's heart. He squatted down in front of him and hugged him. "Little guy, what's your name?" Xiao Yichen was not at all afraid of strangers. His lips curled into a confident smile. "My name is Mu Yichen. Grandpa, you can call me Xiao Yichen." "Xiao Yichen. You're so obedient. So obedient." Yun Yeqing lovingly caressed his tender face, but his heart was filled with emotions. 7 years ago he had brushed shoulders with this child. Back then, when the child came out of the delivery room, he was wrapped in swaddling clothes and wailing loudly. The Mu family was very strict in protecting him, with bodyguards in black leading the way. At the entrance of the delivery room, there were nurses from the Mu group's private hospital waiting to take the child away. As he passed by, he caught a glimpse of the child's wrinkled and red face and his tender little hands waving about in the swaddling clothes. At that time he had the urge to snatch the child away from them, but he knew that such an outcome would be terrible. Hence he restrained his impulse. Other than that one time, they had not seen each other for 7 years. Yun Yeqing could not help but size him up seriously. His small face was fair and translucent as if it was carved out of jade. It was especially adorable, pure and charming. His eyes were similar to Yun Shirshir's, but his silhouette resembled his father's handsomeness. For a moment Yun Yeqing was touched. He could not help but hug the child's shoulders and caress him over and over again. Yun Yeho, on the other hand, felt incredulous when he saw this. Who were these two little guys? Their eyes were very similar to Yun Shirshir's. However, thinking about it, he felt that something was amiss. Yun Shirshir was only 24 years old and unmarried. Where did these children come from? Yun Yeho looked at the two children and then at Yun Shirshir, but out of courtesy he did not ask any questions. Yun Shirshir moved the luggage into the cloakroom and began to get busy. Muyaja was carrying his luggage through the door when he saw this scene. He was stunned for a moment before he said in a deep voice, "Xiao Yichen, come over and help." Seeing this, Yun Yeqing shielded the child and immediately said, "I'll do it. Let me do it. The luggage is too heavy for a child to carry." Xiao Yichen stopped him out of filial piety. "No need. Grandpa, let me do it. You might not be as strong as me." As he spoke, he ran briskly in front of Muyaja, picked up a bag in each hand and sprinted towards the cloakroom, leaving behind a horrified Yun Yeqing. This child, divine power. So strong? This package weighed at least 20 pounds, maybe even 30 pounds. Yet, this child was carrying one in each hand. This was too heaven-defying. Yun Yeqing was truly shocked. Muyaja looked at Yu again. The latter's expression froze before he pretended to hold his stomach and said, "Daddy, my stomach hurts." With that, he pretended to hold his stomach and went to his room to slack off. Muyaja, this rascal. Can't he find a decent excuse to slack off? After the luggage was settled, Yun Yeqing pushed Yun Yeho into the room. As soon as they entered the room, Yun Yeho hurriedly asked about the two children. Chapter 1661. Yun Yeqing did not hide anything from him and recounted in detail how, 7 years ago, the Yun family was facing bankruptcy and was burdened with debt. She had done such a foolish thing for the sake of the Yun family. Yun Yeho was so touched that he could not speak a word. He did not expect Yun Shirshir to do so much for the Yun family though. In his heart he had a very good impression of this child. On the other side, Muyaja was about to go to bed when Yun Shirshir stopped him at the door and said, "You can't stay here tonight." "What's wrong?" Muyaja narrowed his eyes dangerously. "Are you chasing me away?" Yun Shirsher blushed and explained, I don't mean to chase you away. Don't misunderstand. Then what do you mean by not staying here tonight? Mu Yaja sized her up and asked in a deep voice, Woman, are you thinking of rebelling? Yun Shirsher lowered her head and hesitated for a while before she stammered, My dad just said, we haven't registered our marriage yet, so it's not official yet, so it's inevitable that people will gossip about us if we stay together before we get married. Why don't you go back first? Mu Yaja snorted, but his tone revealed his dissatisfaction and domineering. Who dares to gossip about you? Whoever dares to gossip can come forward and try. Yun Shirsher glared at him. All right. It's late now, you should go back and rest early. I'll wash up and get ready to rest too. Mu Yaja furrowed his brows, his eyes showing his displeasure. This is my house. He added, I've already proposed. Could it be that this was not official enough? Yun Shirsher explained, but a proposal doesn't mean marriage. We haven't registered our marriage yet, so we're not husband and wife. It's fine if my dad isn't around, but now that he's home, he'll definitely be afraid of me being gossiped about if he sees us sleeping in the same room. He's old, so his thinking must be a little old-fashioned, but it's for our own good. Mu Yaja. He held onto the door frame to block the door and questioned her, It's so late now, where do you want me to stay? That's true. Although he had a lot of properties under his name, he had been living here most of the time. He rarely returned to the Mu family. Mu Sheng's health was not good, so he would visit him occasionally, but he rarely stayed at home. The other houses were cold and cheerless. There was no hot water or electricity, let alone a change of clothes. She actually wanted to chase him away? She pointed to the ceiling all of a sudden. Why don't you go to the second floor tonight? Mu Yaja's brows sank as he spat out a few words through gritted teeth. Yun sure. I don't care. With that, she gave him a shove and locked the door with a bang. It looked like this silly woman was really determined to keep him at the door. Mu Yaja's face was filled with displeasure when the two little lads mocked him from behind. Yu, oh daddy, so pitiful. Xiao Yichin, so pitiful. The man's face turned green. He turned around abruptly and saw Yu and Xiao Yichin standing together in the corridor. They had the tacit understanding to cover their mouths with their hands and secretly mock him. Tsk. It's so pitiful no matter how I look at it. Chapter 1662. Yu, poor daddy, you're exiled just like that. Xiao Yichin, exiled just like that. Yu, how does it feel to be exiled to the borders? Xiao Yichin, how does it feel? Yu, does it feel sad and wronged? Xiao Yichin, does it feel wronged? Yu, he serves you right. Xiao Yichin, he serves you right. The two little rascals sang the same tune and mocked him mercilessly. Mu Yaja's face fell instantly. Are you tired of living? Mu Yaja clenched his fists, making a few strange sounds. Or are you saying that you're so capable that you dare to make sarcastic remarks about daddy? Xiao Yichin was afraid of his expression and gulped nervously. He recalled the suffering he had suffered at the hands of Mu Yaja in the past. Thus, he admitted defeat and hid behind Yu in fear. However, Yu didn't fall for this trick. She wasn't afraid of his threats and wasn't afraid of his expression at all. Since she had her mommy's support, she put her hands on her hips and looked at him smugly. Daddy, it's very tasteless of you to threaten two 7-year-old children. Mu Yaja. This sharp-tongued little rascal was unmoved by force or persuasion. He narrowed his eyes and said, Go back to your room and sleep. Daddy, why are you so fierce? Yu covered her mouth and snickered. She said mercilessly, Hey look, I was being kind and wanted to say that if you don't know how to make a blanket, I could be kind and help you make a blanket. But you're so fierce, I'm not going to help you. After she finished speaking, Yu held Xiao Yichin's hand and swaggered back to their room. She closed the door with a bang. Mu Yaja clenched his fists. This kid, his ability to hit someone when they are down was not small. There was a master bedroom on the second floor. However, there was no blanket, only a mattress. Mu Yaja had no choice but to fend for himself. He rummaged through the cabinets and took out sheets, blankets, and a set of silk quilts. After tidying them up, he went to the bathroom, took a hot bath, and went to sleep. There's a phrase called sleepless nights. These words were vividly reflected. Throughout the night, a certain man tossed and turned, but still could not fall asleep. In the dark room, the man opened his eyes that were as cold as the moon and stared at the ceiling, but he felt inexplicably irritated. Perhaps it was because he was used to having her by his side during the long nights. Without her by his side, it was easy for him to lose sleep. During the 2 weeks that she was on set, whenever he couldn't sleep he would get up, smoke a few cigarettes, read a few emails and go through a few reports. He would only feel sleepy when he lay in bed at dawn. And last night, with her by his side, he slept exceptionally peacefully. Then what about her? Would she get used to not having him by her side? Or would she fall asleep peacefully as usual? He stretched out his arms a little dejectedly, propped himself up and laid on his side. Yun Shishir's hazy sleeping face seemed to be reflected in his eyes. He couldn't help but reach out to touch it, but it instantly disappeared into thin air. He rubbed his forehead in frustration, feeling extremely frustrated. The next morning Yun Shishir had just finished washing up. When she walked out of the bedroom she saw Muyaja sitting in the living room, smoking a cigarette and flipping through the newspaper. He leaned against the sofa lazily. His neat black hair was slightly messed up by the morning breeze outside the window, covering his pair of deep eyes. As a result, she couldn't see his expression clearly. She was stunned. "You're up so early?" When Muyaja heard her, he raised his head, put down the newspaper and walked towards her. Chapter 1663. His first sentence was filled with an unquestionable power. Yun Shishir had just woken up, but faced with his words she was a little confused. In a daze she replied instinctively, "In the drawer of the TV cabinet in the bedroom." What? Muyaja walked around her and went straight into the room. Yun Shishir was even more confused as she followed him into the room. However, she saw Muyaja squatting in front of the TV cabinet, pulling open the drawer and rummaging through the cabinets. Finally, he found her household register among a stack of documents. "What do you want to do with my household register?" Yun Shishir furrowed her brows as she stared at his cold and deep face. She was a little guarded, but after racking her brains she still couldn't figure out what he was trying to do. Muyaja ignored her words and flipped open the household register until he reached her page. Then he grabbed the household register in his hands and suddenly stood up. He was so tall and straight that it made the room seem small and narrow in an instant. Yun Shishir saw him holding the household register tightly and was even more puzzled. She couldn't figure out what he was trying to do so mysteriously early in the morning. However, she saw him walk in front of her and get close to her. He lowered his head and asked, "Where is your identity card?" "It's in my wallet." Yun Shishir didn't understand, but she still answered obediently. "Where is your wallet?" Yun Shishir blinked. In the glove compartment of the car." Muyaja suddenly grabbed her and walked out of the door in big strides. Yun Shishir struggled for a while and asked with furrowed brows, "Muyaja, you're being so mysterious early in the morning. I can't figure out what you're trying to do." "Follow me." Yun Shishir was stunned and asked in confusion, "Follow you where?" He turned his head abruptly and stared into her eyes as he enunciated each word clearly. "I propose to you, HM?" Yun Shishir nodded her head belatedly. "Yeah, you promised me." Muyaja said again, but his handsome eyes flashed with a touch of light. Yun Shishir pursed her lips, but there was a hint of shyness on her face. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she said, "Why are you asking this? I don't understand the meaning behind your words." "Answer me first." Muyaja paused. His tone was so strong that no one dared to defy him. "You promised me him?" Yes. Yun Shishir was stunned. She felt that the man standing in front of her seemed to be possessed early in the morning. When she woke up, she saw him sitting on the sofa, flipping through the newspaper. She saw that he looked a little tired, but she couldn't figure out when he had slept last night. Hearing this, Muyaja suddenly gave a deep smile and raised his brow elegantly, forming a beautiful crease between his brows. "Then follow me." With that said, he held her hand and was about to walk out of the door. His strides were extremely long, and he walked with his head held high, as if he couldn't wait to do something. Yun Shishir found it difficult to keep up with him. She stumbled and staggered a few steps. She said in annoyance, "What exactly is it?" "To the Civil Affairs Bureau." These 4 short words made Yun Shishir completely confused. What? Civil Affairs Bureau? Perhaps his decision came too suddenly, so she was stunned for a long time. Suddenly, she asked a question very foolishly, "Why are we going to the Civil Affairs Bureau?" Chapter 1664. Her question was simply too silly. Muyaja lost his cool at once. With a playful look in his eyes, he could not help but ask, "Register our marriage." What else could they do at the Civil Affairs Bureau? Yun Shishir gaped in shock. This was such a sudden decision that she was completely unprepared. Hence, when Muyaja said the words "register our marriage," she was left with nothing but shock and confusion. She wasn't ready yet. It was so sudden, she was completely unprepared for it. What's wrong? Muyaja saw her hesitant look and narrowed his handsome eyes slightly in displeasure. You're not willing? Yun Shirshir immediately replied, No, I'm not unwilling. Then why do you have such an expression? Yun Shirshir answered truthfully, I'm not ready. She suddenly thought of something and asked quizzically, Have you checked the almanac? The almanac? Muyaja raised a brow. Yun Shirshir smiled. You might not know common sense. Although we're only registering our marriage and not holding an official wedding, we still have to check the almanac to register our marriage. If it says that today isn't a good day to get married, then it means that it's not a good day to register our marriage. Muyaja, however, curled his lips. I've already checked it. Yun Shirshir was even more dumbfounded. Ah? He knows how to check the almanac? Yun Shirshir suddenly looked at the newspaper on the low table in the living room and suddenly realized why he was sitting on the sofa and flipping through the newspaper early in the morning. So this man had already prepared everything? Muyaja waved the household register in his hand and smiled. Come with me. Not allowing her to refuse, he held her hand and walked out of the door. After Yun Yecheng got out of bed, he first helped his younger brother wash up. When he walked into the living room, he saw Yu reading the newspaper on the sofa. His head was bent as he flipped through the pages, but when he reached the corner of a page, his lips suddenly curled into a smile. Yun Yecheng asked, Yu, is your mommy awake yet? Yu lowered her head and flipped through the newspaper. Then she looked up and smiled brightly. It's time to go out. He asked curiously, Where did you go? Yu thought for a moment and smiled. He probably went to the Civil Affairs Bureau. He closed the newspaper. The moment the wind blew in from outside the window, it lifted a corner of the newspaper. On the page of the almanac it showed, marriage. Muyaja drove to the Civil Affairs Bureau. Along the way, Yun Shirshir still had a mysterious and subtle feeling. In fact, it was a little unbelievable. Therefore, when the two of them arrived at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau and got out of the car, their heads felt heavy and their feet felt light. They were still in a daze. She had an inexplicable feeling. She felt as if she was a duck that had been forced onto a perch and was at the mercy of others. She was inexplicably dragged to the Civil Affairs Bureau, clearly with a bit of coercion. Although the marriage partner standing next to her was handsome and had a prominent family background, and just 2 days ago he had proposed to her, and she had gladly accepted. If it were any other woman, she would be so happy that she would be on cloud 9. However, perhaps it was because he was too sudden and overbearing that she felt as if she was being coerced. She did not know where this impulse of his came from, but it was like a whirlwind that caught her off guard. Could she regret it? Yun Shirshir thought with tears streaming down her face. Chapter 1665. It wasn't that Yun Shirshir wasn't looking forward to the marriage, it was just that it was too rushed and it made her feel unreal. When they were queuing up to register, Yun Shirshir only felt that there was a dark cloud above her head. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled from time to time. The strong wind blew and messed her up. She sat on the chair as if her soul had left her body and she didn't look human at all. Her dispirited state was a stark contrast to the group of happy young couples around her. Muyaja sat beside her and quietly flipped through a financial magazine. His handsome side profile attracted countless envious gazes. It was just that. Everyone glanced at the woman beside him with tears on her face, and their hearts broke out in cold sweat. Was this a forced marriage? No matter how they looked at it, she didn't look like someone who was here to register their marriage willingly. But if it was a forced marriage from their point of view, it was more reasonable for the man to be the one being forced into the marriage. They couldn't help but be puzzled. Today was probably a good day as there seemed to be a lot of people who came to register their marriage at the Civil Affairs Bureau. Yun Shirshir was wearing sunglasses and was fully armed to avoid the inquisitive gazes of the crowd. Perhaps it was because most of the young people who came to register their marriage were immersed in joy, hence they didn't notice the subtle atmosphere between Yun Shirshir and Muyaja. She was in a daze when she suddenly heard some movement beside her. Turning her head, she saw Muyaja slowly getting up. She looked at him suspiciously, not knowing what he was going to do. Could it be that he was going back on his word? Or could it be that he also realized that marriage was such a solemn matter and shouldn't be decided so hastily on a whim? Muyaja glanced at her and said plainly, "The ID card is in the car. I'll go get it. Wait for me here." Her hopes were dashed. Yun Shirshir nodded woodenly. After he walked away, a woman beside her curiously leaned over and asked excitedly, "He's your man?" "Yes." Yun Shirshir wore her sunglasses and gave an ambiguous answer. "You should be here to register your marriage." When Yun Shirshir heard this, the corners of her mouth turned down and she didn't seem to be happy about registering their marriage. The woman exclaimed, "Eh? I see that you and that handsome guy are both very young. It seems like you're here to get your marriage certificate. But looking at your expression, it seems like you're here to register a divorce." Yun Shirshir was speechless. The reason why the woman said that was probably because she looked like a resentful woman who had been abandoned. The woman's eyes lit up. "However, your man is really handsome. At first glance I thought it was a movie star. You're even more handsome than movie stars." The man sitting next to the woman was a little unhappy. Hey, your husband is sitting next to you. How dare you praise another man in front of me?" The woman immediately hugged his arm coquettishly. Of course you're the most handsome in my heart." The two people in front of her were flirting with each other happily. Yun Shirshir was caught off guard and was fed a mouthful of dog food. The correct way to get a marriage certificate should be like this. But just now, Muyaja had been sitting next to her without saying a word. His eyes were like torches as he stared at the service counter with a serious expression. He didn't have the sweetness of a young couple registering their marriage at all. The more she thought about it, the more bitter Yun Shirshir felt. She lowered her head silently. Chapter 1666. Yun Shirshir looked up and tried to smile. "He's the one who's about to enter the marriage grave with me." The woman was speechless. She mumbled, "Why do you make such a happy thing sound so tragic? How can it not be tragic? If she was bullied by him in the future, it would be perfectly justifiable. That man is marrying you. You've made a fortune. Isn't there a saying that marriage is the grave of love? Then do you know what it's called if you're not married?" Yun Shirshir asked curiously, "What?" "If you're not married, it's called abandoning your corpse in the wilderness." Yun Shirshir was amused by her. "You mean I have to be grateful?" The woman smiled and was about to say something when her gaze suddenly turned behind him. She looked up slightly in surprise. Yun Shirshir felt a chill run down her spine. She turned her head woodenly and saw Muyaja standing behind her. He was sizing her up coldly. "Did you have a good chat?" Muyaja sat down beside her and raised his eyebrows. Yun Shirshir couldn't help but shiver. "It was all right. She didn't say anything bad about him, did she? Here's the main point." Muyaja stared at her and asked unkindly, "Do you think that marrying me is the same as entering the grave?" Yun Shirshir shook her head. The woman reached out her hand to him in a friendly manner and interrupted them. She said happily, "Hello. This handsome guy." Muyaja looked coldly at her outstretched hand. He looked down indifferently and said indifferently, "Do we know each other?" Her enthusiasm was instantly extinguished after being splashed with a bucket of cold water. She retracted her hand resentfully and shrank into her man's arm. She thought to herself, no wonder the girl doesn't want to marry you. She was so fierce to him. She was being forced to marry him. Perhaps it was because Muyaja was sitting next to her, but Yun Shirshir's back was straight and her back was straight. She was like a primary school student who was in class for the first time. She stared straight ahead without moving. Muyaja glanced at her indifferently and inched closer to her ear. His voice was strangely gentle. "Are you very unwilling to marry me, hm?" This voice was so gentle that it made one's hair stand on end. Yun Shirshir was slightly stunned and her heart trembled. Answer me." Yun Shirshir immediately lifted her head and answered matter-of-factly, "I'm willing. Of course I'm willing." "Really?" "Absolutely, from the bottom of my heart." The conversation between the two of them attracted a lot of attention. Everyone looked at them curiously, thinking that this newlywed couple was very interesting. Muyaja narrowed his eyes dangerously and said coldly, "Then don't let me see your face that looks like you're being forced into marriage again." "Face that looks like she's being forced into marriage." Yun Shirshir touched the corner of her mouth gloomily. She had to admit that she almost choked to death because of this word. Was her face really that ugly right now? The line moved forward in an orderly manner and it was soon their turn. Before Yun Shirshir could react, Muyaja grabbed her wrist and practically dragged her all the way to the registration counter. Yun Shirshir felt that her head was heavy and her feet were light. She looked at Muyaja again and saw that his face was still as calm as water. There was no expression on his face, be it the joy of being newlyweds or the disappointment. Why was he always so calm about everything he did? Chapter 1667. Muyaja had put in a lot of effort. Everything was ready and they just needed to take a photo and stamp it. After the photo was taken, the two of them sat at the reception desk. The woman looked up at Yun Shirshir and felt a little strange. She wondered if the two of them were willing to get married. However, she didn't want to be a busybody. Just as she was about to hit the stamp, She saw Yun Shirshir suddenly jump up like a little puppy. She held the woman's hand that was holding the stamp tightly and shouted, "Wait!" After she said that, the staff was shocked by her. They looked up blankly and stared at her blankly. After a while they asked blankly, What's the matter?" See, it was indeed a forced marriage. Was there a need to be so shocked? Only then did Yun Shirshir realize what she had done. Blinking her eyes, she suddenly felt a chill run down her spine and shuddered. She turned around stiffly and saw that a certain man's face was ashen and extremely gloomy. Her roar attracted everyone's attention. They stared curiously at the couple and began to whisper to each other. "It's over, it's all over now." Earlier on, she had grabbed her hand subconsciously. She didn't know why, but when she saw that the stamp was about to hit the stamp, her heart was filled with curses. She didn't know what was wrong with her. She was so agitated that her hand slipped. "What's the matter, female comrade? Why aren't you talking?" Yun Shirshir reacted and looked at the man beside her. Suddenly she asked seriously, "Have you thought it through?" Muyaja's expression changed. "Have you thought it through and decided that you want to be with me for the rest of your life?" She probably didn't feel safe. Happiness seemed to have fallen from the sky. She was so worried about her gains and losses that she was trembling with fear and didn't even dare to stretch out her hand to catch it. Muyaja frowned. "Are you regretting it? This damned woman." When he proposed to her, she had clearly agreed. Was she regretting it now? Yun Shirshir smiled bitterly. "I'm afraid that you'll regret it." She was afraid that she would lose her happiness after having it. She was afraid that if such a day came, she would feel as if it was the end of the world. The staff member was speechless. Her hand that was about to hit the stamp froze in midair. Muyaja stared at her face and suddenly smiled deeply. He hugged her shoulders and kissed her passionately on the lips. Their breaths and breaths touched. As he kissed her, he pressed his lips against hers and said word by word, "I've never regretted the things I've done." Yun Shirshir's heart trembled. She was so happy that she felt numb. Was this a promise to her in disguise? The staff member was caught off guard and was a little hurt. So she asked again, "Are you still planning to get married?" "Not." The two of them looked at her and spoke in unison. The staff member was dumbfounded once more. "I'm sorry, sister. I was just afraid that the stamp wouldn't be dark enough." Yun Shirshir smiled and pushed the stamp over. She finally had the sweetness of a newlywed. "Dip it in more. Be a glorious witness for us." Did this girl think that she was a revolutionary? Chapter 1668. Yun Shirshir was in a good mood. She said casually, "Congratulations to you too." Muyaja's expression turned even colder as he glanced at her coldly. This woman was so stupid that she was hopelessly stupid. But he was also hopelessly in love with her. Two red booklets were placed in her hands. Yun Shirshir flipped open the marriage certificate. In the photo, the two of them were wearing white shirts. They were looking at the camera, smiling as they snuggled up to each other. As she looked at it, the corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl up. Her mood was as though she was sitting on a hot air balloon, slowly floating into the clouds. She was married. They were married. On the 25th of December 2016, she married herself to him. She was so elated that when she walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, she still felt like she was floating. "Look." Yun Shirshir was as happy as a child. She showed the marriage certificate to him. "We're married." Muyaja looked at her dotingly and smiled. "Oh, I know." "Muyaja, look, it's our photo." Yun Shirshir flipped open the marriage certificate and showed the photo of the two of them. She asked jokingly, "Don't we look very compatible?" Muyaja couldn't help but laugh. Women are really fickle. Yun Shirshir's smile faded a little. She didn't understand. "Why do you say that?" Muyaja said, "On the way here you were so unwilling. Now you're so happy?" Yun Shirshir retorted, "Hey, that's not called unwilling. Early in the morning, you suddenly pulled me to the Civil Affairs Bureau without a word of discussion. If it wasn't for the glaring sun outside, I would have thought that I was still dreaming." He pinched her cheeks. His fingertips were so strong that she frowned in pain. "What are you doing? You know pain?" "Of course." Muyaja's smile deepened. "So now you believe that this isn't a dream?" Yun Shirshir smiled and suddenly turned around to face him. She reached out her arms and held his shoulders. He was so tall that when she hugged him tightly, she had to stand on her tiptoes. "How nice." Yun Shirshir snuggled in his arms and suddenly said something that made him not know whether to laugh or cry. "Finally, we're not driving without a license." Muyaja, this stupid woman. But no matter how she was, he liked her. After getting into the car, she spread her hands. "Give it to me." Muyaja stared at her coldly before taking out his wallet and handing over a few bank cards to her. She widened her eyes in shock. "What are you doing?" Muyaja enunciated, "I'll hand over my bank card. Yun Shirshir, you'll be in charge of the daily expenses." "Do you have to be so self-conscious?" Yun Shirshir was shocked by his self-awareness. She only cared about money. Little money grubber. Muyaja couldn't help but give her a knock on the head. "What else do you want?" Yun Shirshir rolled her eyes. "Of course it's your ID card." So she wasn't asking for his bank cards? Muyaja looked at her again, but his gaze was a little strange. Yun Shirshir felt that he was looking at her as if he was looking at a pig. "Your gaze is very insulting," she reminded him carefully. Muyaja ignored her. He opened his wallet and passed his ID card to her. Chapter 1669. She was not reserved at all. She had just registered her marriage and she was already calling him husband. Muyaja was annoyed, but in his heart, he was happy to be called husband. 880214. "Is it your birthday?" "Yes." "February 14th. That was Valentine's Day. Who would have thought that her husband was an Aquarius born on Valentine's Day?" "All right, thank you, my dear husband." Thus, a certain someone shamelessly put the bank card into her wallet. She was calm and collected. Suddenly, she asked suspiciously, "Are all your belongings here?" "Sort of." Yun Shirshir was displeased. "What do you mean, sort of?" She thought for a moment and narrowed her eyes. "Are you secretly hiding money?" Muyaja was speechless. Yun Shirshir said seriously, "In the past, the CEO of our company handed his salary card to his wife, but he secretly deposited a card with a lot of money in it. Don't tell me you're hiding money too?" Muyaja glanced at her coldly and said, "Honey, you're so cute. How can those men compare to me?" When he called her honey, she instantly blushed. Now, she was still not used to being called that. But she had to get used to it slowly, didn't she? Then she said in amusement, "Why can't we compare? Is there a difference?" Muyaja smiled. "Of course there's a difference." Yun Shirshir was a little confused. "What's the difference?" What was the difference? Just this salary card alone was different. Those big bosses, even if they handed over their salary cards to their wives, which one of them did not have other cards in their hands? Some of them, although they were CEOs in name, were hired by the board of directors or with high salaries. Their income could be felt. But it was different for him. He was the owner of Dishing Financial Group. Just the small change in his account was enough for the bank to make a huge profit. The daily interest could reach 8 figures. This was definitely not a bluff. For a huge financial group like Dishing, just the capital chain in their hands was impressive. With such a huge capital chain, the interest in the banks under the Mu Group just kept growing. It was already difficult to calculate. Moreover, with his status, how could it be just an account? The funds in the dozens of accounts under his name were constantly rolling in. What was a salary card? All he knew was that he was paying the salaries of hundreds of thousands of Dishing Financial Group employees. His so-called salary cards were probably just a few of the accounts under his name where he could move his funds. An account was an account, and property was property. His bank account wasn't fixed like those bosses. If he had to describe it, it was like a black hole in the universe. He couldn't see it and couldn't see its bottom. Even he himself didn't know how deep and how big it was. The balance in the card kept accumulating every day. It was probably inexhaustible even if he used it all his life. Therefore, the funds in the account he gave Yun Shirshir included about 70% of the movable assets under his name. However, the amount in these accounts could only be said to be a fraction of his personal assets. After all, money would depreciate. After all, in today's inflation, the speed of currency depreciation was not something the bank's interest could keep up with. Chapter 1670. Therefore, most of the assets under his name were invested in real estate and other projects, such as resorts, hotels, shares of listed companies, consortiums, fund pools, private islands, and private land rights. The few digits in his account were just for appetizers. His assets were active, and every day a few digits would be added to his account. However, even if it was just a fraction to him, to this stupid woman, it might be an astronomical figure. If she went to the bank to withdraw money, the deposit machine wouldn't show the exact amount. She had to be personally received by the VIP service at the counter to withdraw money. Even the bank's lobby manager had to clear the way for her. Therefore, in order to avoid trouble, he specially prepared a small bank card for her. The card had about 8 digits in savings which could be used for daily expenses and groceries. If Yun Shirshir knew that her beloved husband had prepared an 8-digit bank card for her to use to buy groceries, she would be so angry that she would vomit blood. Poor stupid woman. At this moment she was thinking in her heart. If she tied his bank card to a shopping website, wouldn't she be able to buy without worrying about the account balance being insufficient? If Muyaja knew that she was only capable of this, he would be so angry that he would vomit blood. Perhaps this was the part where the two of them needed to get used to each other the most. Yun Shirshir had lived a hard life since she was young. She wished that she could break $1 into $2 to use. Where she could save, she scrimped and saved. She would never be extravagant or wasteful. The biggest temptation of acting was probably the high income. Acting in a show, A-list celebrities could earn hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars per episode. Although it was tough, if they were successful, the glory and benefits that came with it were also very tempting. However, in her eyes, hundreds of thousands was already considered a lot. In Muyaja's eyes, it was beneath contempt. He had lived in such an environment since he was young, so he was almost numb to the concept of money. They were like people from two different worlds. In Yun Shirshir's eyes, those few thousands of dollars of wages that were calculative over every ounce were nothing in his eyes. If she knew that he could easily buy an economically developed first-tier city with his ability, how would she feel? If she knew that he could buy 2 countries, would this woman be petrified from shock? She didn't seem to have estimated his net worth at all. She also didn't seem to know what the Mu group meant. His woman didn't know how terrifying her man was. He was clearly a heavenly dragon, but in her heart she felt that he was no different from a snake on the ground. This had made him a little depressed. At first she acted as if she didn't care about him no matter how rich he was. At that time he thought she was an idiot. Slowly he began to suspect that this woman was pretending to be a pig to eat the tiger. She was very scheming and shrewd. It was not until later that he realized that she was an idiot. She was different from those women who were good at scheming. She might be a little stupid, but he liked her pure and unadulterated personality even more. Yun Shirshir didn't know what he was thinking. Suddenly she nudged him with her elbow. "You didn't regret handing over your bank card?" Muyaja smiled but didn't say anything. She threatened, "Don't blame me when I squander all your money." Chapter 1671. It just so happens that I lack a woman who can squander my family fortune for me. Muyaja's lips curled up. His eyes were conceited and domineering with a hint of domineering indulgence. Man. He had built this Mu empire, just so that one day his woman and child could live a happy and prosperous life. Other than that, even if he had shocking power, it was meaningless. Yun Shirshir was a little overwhelmed by his domineering words. She had only heard men say this before, "I lack a woman who can run the house diligently for me." But she had never heard a man say this in such a bold manner, "I lack a woman who can squander my family fortune for me." He said this naturally because he had the confidence to do so. Yun Shirshir could not help but want to pour cold water on him. She giggled and said jokingly, "Humph, I don't believe you when you say this now." He was puzzled. "Why?" Yun Shirshir said seriously, "If you dare to say this before Singles Day, then you are a real man." Muyaja was speechless. This stupid woman. Muyaja stared at her face with a deep gaze. Yun Shirshir saw his gaze and raised her eyebrows as if she was provoking him. "What? Am I right? No matter when I dare to say such words." Muyaja liked how she acted like a clown. He could not help but pinch her cheeks and smile. "If you have the ability, squander my money." He did not believe that she would lose more than he earned. Yun Shirshir smiled and pretended to be a clown as she leaned closer to him. She held his arm and giggled. "Tycoon, if you are so rich, do you lack pendants on your legs?" "Nope." Yun Shirshir's smile disappeared and she pretended to be wronged as she stared at him. Unexpectedly, he leaned closer to her and stared into her eyes. He said teasingly, "I lack a place in my heart. Do you want it?" His voice was so charming and his breath was like orchids. His warm breath brushed against her cheeks. His ambiguous words of love made her blush and her heart beat faster. However, he rarely said sweet nothings. Occasionally he would say a sentence, but it was impossible to resist. Yun Shirshir's face instantly turned as red as blood. It was unbelievably hot. She seemed to be shy so easily. Even if she didn't express it, the blush on her face betrayed her. Her skin was extremely fair. Thus, at this moment, the flush on her face was simply unable to conceal her helplessness and shyness. Yun Shirshir suddenly thought of something. She looked up and asked curiously, "Hey, I want to ask you, why did you suddenly drag me to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get our marriage certificate?" "Hello." Muyaja raised his eyebrows slightly. Clearly, he was dissatisfied with the way she addressed him. "Honey, pay attention to your words. What should you call me?" Yun Shirshir blushed again. She didn't seem to be able to adapt so quickly. She knitted her brows. Under his deep gaze she said shyly, "Hun? Hubby?" Muyaja raised his eyebrows in relief. Clearly, this form of address was even more pleasing to the ear. "Call me that again." Yun Shirshir was like a child who was learning how to speak. She lowered her head slightly and consolidated her revision under his guidance. "Hubby, you're too soft. Hubby, be gentler." Yun Shirshir cleared her throat and said softly, "Hubby." Chapter 1672. In the next second, the man suddenly came up to her, his large palm firmly holding the back of her neck. In the next second, his warm thin lips covered hers. He didn't take her by force. It was just a simple kiss. He covered her small pink lips and couldn't bear to move an inch. Their faces were very close. His eyes were half open, and his thick and long eyelashes were intertwined with hers. It was unbelievably intimate. They were so close that Yun Shirshir could only see a pair of deep and mesmerizing eyes with her eyes half open. They were endless. But they also seemed to be hiding a vast galaxy of stars shining brightly. Anyone who looked at them would fall into that tenderness. She wondered if this man would pamper her. She felt that in front of him she was being pampered and indulged like a little princess. It was as if in that broad embrace she could do whatever she wanted. But, being pampered by someone, it was inevitable that she would feel worried. The more infatuated she was, the more she was afraid of losing him. However, even if it was just for a second, she didn't want to wake up from this tenderness. Yun Shirshir hugged his shoulders and deepened the kiss. After Muyaja sent her home, he decided to make a trip to the office. There were still a few meetings in the office waiting for him to take charge of the overall situation. Hence he had to make a trip there. Yun Shirshir couldn't help but feel a little worried. "Aren't you going to rest? You don't seem to have rested well." Muyaja saw the tenderness in her eyes and was interested. "Is your heart aching?" Yun Shirshir coughed and glared at him, seemingly wanting to say something. Muyaja smiled. "Be good and wait for me at home. Wait for me at home." These words warmed her heart. Yun Shirshir pursed her lips and looked at him. She reminded him shyly, "Come back early." Okay. After Muyaja finished speaking, he turned the car around and drove off. Yun Shirshir returned home. The moment she opened the door, she saw Yun Yeching sitting upright in the living room, looking anxious as if he had been waiting for her for a long time. Yun Yeho, on the other hand, was sitting at the side with Yu serving him a cup of hot tea. Upon seeing her return home, Yun Yeching stood up abruptly and went straight to the point. "Shirshir, where did you go so early in the morning?" Yun Shirshir was stunned. She looked at Yun Yeching, only to see him looking worried and his mind going blank for a moment. How could she forget that she hadn't asked for Muyaja's opinion when she registered her marriage with him? It was as if the two of them were eloping. They sneaked to the Civil Affairs Bureau and got a marriage certificate. However, it happened so suddenly that she didn't have the chance to report it to him. Yun Shirshir replied, "Dad, I went to the Civil Affairs Bureau this morning." "Civil Affairs Bureau?" Yun Yeching raised a brow suspiciously. Then, as if he had thought of something, he asked doubtfully, "Did you register your marriage with him?" Yun Shirshir pursed her lips and nodded slowly. Yun Yeching's gaze fell on the two marriage certificates she was holding tightly in her hands. His face froze for a moment. "You two registered your marriage? Why so sudden?" He had just returned to the capital yesterday, and that mysterious and honorable man seemed to have fallen from the sky and become his son-in-law. After one night, he had actually jumped from a prospective son-in-law to a legitimate son-in-law. He could not figure it out. Chapter 1673. Yun Yeching looked at Yun Shirshir in disbelief. Frowning, he opened his mouth to speak but hesitated. In the end, after pondering for a long time, he suddenly asked in a deep voice, "Have you really made up your mind? Dad, are you really ready to get married? Marriage isn't like dating. There are many things to consider. It may sound complicated, but marriage and love are different." As he spoke, he frowned with a conflicted expression. He was obviously very depressed. His daughter had registered her marriage with another man without saying a word. Until now he still felt a little confused. Why was he so confused? "Shirshir, this is too sudden. Dad really isn't ready yet." Yun Yeching shook his head and sighed. From his nervous expression, it was obvious that he was very worried. He was afraid that she had made a decision on a whim and had not thought it through at all. She had so easily entrusted her life to a man she did not know very well. Yes, his daughter was already 24 years old. She was already an adult and mentally mature. She was fully capable of making her own decisions about marriage. He had no right to interfere with her marriage. However, no matter how old she was in his eyes, she was still a child who had not grown up yet. Therefore, he could not accept her sudden decision for the time being. There were a lot of things to pay attention to when getting married. Getting married wasn't as simple as getting a marriage certificate. Falling in love was a matter between two people. Marriage, on the other hand, was a matter between the man and the woman and the family. From the ceremony, asking for the name, choosing the bride and groom, every step was very serious and could not be sloppy. But she actually registered her marriage in a flash. Wasn't it a little too hasty? Yun Shirshir smiled and held his hand. Dad, I know you have a lot of worries. I also know that this marriage seems rushed and careless in your eyes. But I'm ready to start a family. Being able to spend the rest of my life with him is a matter of careful consideration. I feel very lucky and blessed, Dad. Don't worry about me, I can make decisions for my own life. Hearing this, Yun Yecheng's heart calmed down and his nervous expression eased a little. He heaved a sigh of relief and said earnestly, Shirshir, don't misunderstand. I'm not blaming you for not reporting to me when you registered your marriage. It's just that, it's a little sudden. Dad can't accept it right away. However, Papa's attitude was very clear. Papa hopes that you can be happy, and not because of a moment of impulse, hastily decide your happiness for life. However, you're mature and sensible. You've always had your own thoughts and considerations. You won't make a muddle-headed decision. Dad also believes in your vision and any decision you make. After a pause, he placed his hand on the back of her hand and patted it gently. He sighed. No matter who it is, as long as it's a man you fancy, Daddy will unconditionally support him. As long as the future is decided by you, Dad will sincerely bless you. She hugged him and said emotionally, Dad, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you for forgiving me. Maybe I was a little stubborn this time and made you worry. Chapter 1674. Behind them, Yun Yeho was surprised to learn from their conversation that Yun Shirshir had already gotten her marriage certificate. He pushed his wheelchair toward her and asked in surprise, Shirshir, you've already gotten your marriage certificate? Yes. Yun Shirshir nodded. Yun Yeho was stunned to hear this. Then he smiled with heartfelt joy in his eyes. Shirshir, I'm so happy for you. He turned around only to see a complicated look on his father's face, which was filled with slight dissatisfaction. Brother. Look at you, why do you look like that? Shirshir has gotten her marriage certificate. It's a joyous occasion. This means that I'm in luck. It looks like I'll be able to attend Shirshir's wedding soon. After a pause, he shifted his gaze to Yun Shirshir and said, Shirshir, Uncle sincerely wishes you all the best. I hope that you'll live a happy life. Yun Shirshir was touched. Thank you, Uncle. Yun Yecheng asked, where is he? The he was referring to was probably Mu Yaja. Yun Shirshir replied, he still has work to do. He went to work after sending me home. Yun Tianyu and Xiao Yichen gathered around. The mischievous Xiao Yichen snatched the 2 marriage certificates from Yun Shirshir's hands and flipped through them with Yu. He then exclaimed exaggeratedly, wow. Mommy is so beautiful. Daddy is so handsome. A handsome man and a beautiful woman, they're a match made in heaven. Yu glanced at him coldly and teased, Yo Xiao Yichen, you're not simple at all. You finally used 2 idioms correctly, that's praiseworthy. Xiao Yichen was greatly provoked. He straightened his back and said seriously, I'm a cultured person. Yu mercilessly displayed his unparalleled sharp-tongued skills. Xiao Yichen, since you're so thick-skinned, why don't you lend me some for the winter? Xiao Yichen's face instantly crumbled. He wanted to cry but had no tears. He was not as eloquent as Yu. In terms of bickering, he was completely at a disadvantage. Xiao Yichen was so angry that he was about to cry. Yu saw that he was about to cry and immediately comforted him. Don't lower your head, the crown will fall off. Don't cry, Yu will laugh. After saying that, a certain evil little munchkin even reached out his hand to rub Xiao Yichen's tender cheeks. Little Yichen looked at him innocently, letting him do whatever he wanted. Seeing the 2 children fooling around, Yun Yecheng and Yun Yeho could not help but laugh. Yun Shirshir could not stand it anymore. She grabbed Yu's little hand and slapped it twice. Yu, don't bully your brother. Xiao Yichen resentfully extended his little paw at her. Mommy? Yu snorted at the side. Xiao Yichen, you've grown up. Now you know how to act pitiful to gain sympathy? I'm not playing with you anymore. Xiao Yichen turned around with a look that said, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Yu smiled helplessly and walked over. All right. Daddy and Mommy are registering their marriage today. Let's get along peacefully, okay? Really? Xiao Yichen turned around and stuck out his little finger. Okay. Pinky swear. After the family had lunch, Yun Shishir drove to the hotel. Along the way, she asked Qin Zhou and Mu Shi to help her find a relatively quiet neighborhood where she could settle her siblings. Just as she arrived, she heard her daughter complaining. Shishir, why are you only here now? Didn't you say that you'll pick us up in the morning? Chapter 1675. Yun Qingmiao probed from the side. Shishir, don't tell me that you slept in early and couldn't get up? Yun Shishir explained, I had something on earlier so I came late. Xiang Yu, who had already changed her clothes, walked out of the room and asked, Have you arranged a house for us? She asked with a righteous tone, as if she were ordering her about like a servant, without the slightest bit of politeness or courtesy. Logically speaking, Yun Shishir had no obligation to settle everything for them. Looking for a house was their own business, so there was no need for her to arrange everything for them. However, Yun Shishir had done so for the sake of Yun Yeqing and the fact that they were her distant relatives. Still, she felt that the woman's attitude was not polite at all. It was as if Yun Shishir was expected to do so. Even someone with a good temper like her could not help feeling a little uncomfortable when she heard the woman's words. She mumbled, Not yet. I've already asked a friend to look for a quieter neighborhood. I'll bring you guys over to take a look right away. Only then did the woman nod in satisfaction. All right. Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli exchanged glances before they suddenly asked Yun Shishir, Is the house price in the capital expensive? It's all right. We just came to the capital not long ago, so we don't have much savings on us. Can you bear the rent for us first? We'll talk about it after we've established a foothold in the capital. Although she was negotiating with her, her tone did not sound like she was willing to negotiate at all. Yun Shishir furrowed her brows but did not refuse. She had originally intended to bear the rent for them first, but the moment they said it, it sounded a little different. Still, Yun Shishir was an introverted person. Even though she felt uncomfortable, she did not take issue with them. After they were done packing their luggage, Yun Shishir paid for the room and drove them to the address Mu Shi had sent her. Along the way, Yun Qingmiao sat in the front passenger seat and leisurely browsed the passing scenery outside the window. In her boredom, she looked around the car when her gaze suddenly landed on Yun Shishir. Finally, she caught sight of the dazzling diamond ring on the latter's ring finger, which was holding the steering wheel. It was a 1-carat pink diamond. Yun Qingmiao had heard that pink was a rare color among diamonds. Moreover, it was an exquisite 1-carat diamond. Hence, there was some incredulity in her eyes, but more than that, suspicion. Is this diamond ring real or fake? She asked suspiciously as she looked around. Yun Qinli's attention immediately. She followed Yun Qingmiao's gazes, and saw the eye-catching resplendent ring on Yun Shishir's finger. Subconsciously he exclaimed, Wow! This diamond ring is so big. It's so bright that it doesn't seem real. Yun Shishir smiled but did not say anything. At the side, Yun Qingmiao asked, Shishir, is this diamond ring real or made of crystal? Yun Qinli answered matter-of-factly, It must be real. If it's not, it'll be very embarrassing to wear it on one's finger and be recognized by people who know. Still, I can't tell if it's real or fake, nor can I tell. Chapter 1676. After receiving Yun Shishir's message, she quickly contacted a few houses and was now waiting at the entrance of the neighborhood for quite some time. After parking the car, Yun Shishir put on a mask and got out of the car. The assistant went up to her with a smile. Shishir, are you not on set these few days? I heard that the director has arranged for you to rest since it's your birthday. Yun Qingmiao, who was listening at the side, raised a brow when she caught the hint. She asked in surprise, Set? Director? After a pause, she asked Yun Shishir in shock, Shishir, are you acting now? Yun Shishir gave an ambiguous answer. You can say so. She was a little unhappy though. She felt that she was trying to hide something from her. Without giving her a chance to ask, Yun Shishir said, Let's go take a look at the houses first. With that, she stepped forward and quickly pulled her to the side. Don't mention my identity, understand? Mu Shi was also confused. Shishir, I'm the one who wants to ask you. Why do you want me to help you find a house for no reason? Also, she looked at the mother-daughter trio behind Yun Shishir and felt even more puzzled. Who are they? Yun Shishir sighed. Distant relatives. I have to take care of them on this trip to the capital and help them to settle down. Distant relatives? Mu Shi frowned and suddenly felt a little worried. Shishir, I'm not trying to sow discord. I just feel that the three of them aren't easy to deal with. She had been in the industry for many years. Although she was not a shrewd person, she had seen countless people. In her line of work, It was basic for her to learn how to read people's expressions. More often than not, it required her to have a rough idea of a person's character with just one look. Her first impression of Jianghu and her two daughters was not very good. She said worriedly, "I didn't know that they are your distant relatives. I let it slip just now. Sure, don't get too close to them in the future. You are now on the rise in the industry. Try not to cause trouble." "I understand." Yun Sure gave her a brief rundown of the situation. The assistant understood, so she walked up to her aunt and greeted her with a smile. "Hello, Auntie. I'm Shure's colleague. Today I'll be bringing you guys around the house so that we can settle in as soon as possible." Xiangyu looked around and suddenly frowned. She said in a strange tone, "Why is this neighborhood so secluded? It seems to be in a very remote location. It's not very lively." Mushi was speechless. "Any is like this. It's still daytime now and everyone in the neighborhood is at work." "Oh." Xiangyu was still a little worried. "Don't find me a house that's too remote. It'll be dangerous." How could that be? This place wasn't remote. Although it was a little far from the city center, the transportation routes were very convenient. There was a bus stop right outside the neighborhood. Not far away was the subway line 3, which went straight to the city center. It's not that remote. Mushi had put in a lot of effort in looking for a house, but the capital's housing prices were shocking after all. The closer it was to the city center, the more expensive it was. She was rather meticulous in her selection. Yun Sure was more assured with her handling the matter, so she brought the mother-daughter trio upstairs to look at the houses. However, when they looked at the houses, Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli started complaining. Chapter 1677. Forget about her fear of heights. She actually said that the house was too small. Mushi broke out in a cold sweat at the side. Of course the house was small. This was an apartment building. Unlike the self-built houses in the countryside, the property prices here had always been high. Even after working for so long and saving up for so many years, she still could not save enough for the down payment of a house. It was the dream of many to be able to settle down in the capital. However, most people could only sigh at the sight of the rising property prices. Alas, Yun Qingmiao's casual remark was, "The house is really small. Buying a house like this would cost 2 to 3 million yuan. She actually said that it was small. Hence, she explained, the property prices in the capital are high. Although the land here isn't as expensive as some other areas, the land price is still considerable. That's why, the rent is also very expensive. I heard that Sure is paying the rent for you guys. Her income isn't high, so she chose this place when she was looking for a house." As she said this, she did not forget to sigh. Shure's work has actually just taken a turn for the better, so I also want to reduce her pressure. Yun Sure was not around at this moment. Only then did the woman open her mouth and say matter-of-factly, "He. I'm her auntie, shouldn't she be nicer to me? It's rare for us to come to the capital, and everything hasn't been settled yet. It's only natural for us to be nicer to her." Mushi frowned deeply. This woman was really blunt with her words. Just because she was Shure's auntie, did Shure have to be their slave? On what basis? Although the rent was nothing to Shure, they were not at all courteous and did not even say a word of thanks. Given Shure's character, she was not greedy for their gratitude, but it was too unreasonable to take other people's kindness for granted. Mushi was a little displeased, but due to her status she could not openly complain. Her aunt asked, "How much is the rent here?" She answered honestly, "About 4 to 5,000 yuan." 4 to 5,000 yuan? Xiangyu gasped. So expensive. Mushi thought that she would at least be a little more understanding toward Shure after hearing her words, but she did not expect her next words to make her so angry that she was speechless. "Fortunately, Shure is paying the rent for us. Otherwise, how can we afford such an expensive apartment?" Yun Qingmiao, who was standing at the side, asked worriedly, "Mom, why don't we get Shure to pay a year's rent for us first? Even if we work, it'll be hard for us to pay such a high rent." Exactly. As for Sister Shure, it shouldn't be too difficult for her to bear the rent for a year. Mom, go and talk to her. She'll definitely agree. Yun Qinli suggested from the side. Xiangyu nodded, apparently thinking the same thing. Mushi had a taste of the mother-daughter trio's shamelessness. She spoke up from the side. "Shure has just started working and you guys are asking her to bear the rent for a year. Auntie, you should be more understanding for Shure." Xiangyu suddenly frowned in displeasure. Yun Qingmiao asked, "Just started? That can't be. I see that she's quite well-to-do, she even drives a Mercedes-Benz. I'm guessing that her income should be very high. Otherwise, how can she afford to drive a Mercedes-Benz?" Mushi thought to herself, it's none of your business what kind of car she drives. Even if she drives a Porsche, she has no obligation to support you guys. Chapter 1678. In the end, the two girls were dissatisfied with this aspect. Mushi could only contact another house and bring them to look at it. Yun Shirshir, who was downstairs to learn about the property, was puzzled when she saw the crestfallen girl leading the trio down the stairs. Mushi, what do you think of the house? She then asked her aunt, Auntie, are you satisfied with it? It's too small. I think it's only about 80 square meters, it's too cramped. Her assistant explained, the house is about 100 square meters, but the higher the floor, the lower the occupancy rate. She then turned to Yun Shirshir. Shirshir, I just contacted a house in Funan district, but the bigger the house, the higher the price. It's fine. Yun Shirshir was anxious to deal with them, so she did not mind if the house price was a little higher. On the way to Funan district, Jianghu suddenly asked, Shirshir, Auntie has something to discuss with you. Yun Shirshir replied, Go ahead, Auntie. Before that, Auntie wants to ask, is your monthly income high? She wanted to find out about her income first before acting according to the situation. Yun Shirshir smiled helplessly. Auntie, just tell me what you want. I'll do my best to satisfy you. Aya? It's like this, Xiangyu explained. We've just arrived in the capital, so we don't have much money. I just asked that young lady about the rent. It's indeed very expensive. 4,000 to 5,000 a month is not something we can afford with our current conditions. We don't have much money on us and the capital's expenses are high, so we're afraid that we won't have enough. Qingmiao and Qinli haven't found a job yet, so Auntie wants to discuss with you whether you can pay a year's rent for us first. Once their jobs are stable, hee. She did not say the rest directly, but the meaning behind her words was clear. She wanted Yun Shirshir to pay a year's rent for them first. Yun Shirshir readily agreed. Okay, no problem. The production team of The Green Apple had already paid her. Although it wasn't a lot and couldn't be compared to the first-tier brands, it was still a decent amount. Lin Fengtian treated her well and paid her double the amount stated in the contract. She was pleasantly surprised and grateful to him. In addition to the remuneration from the advertising contract. Therefore, to her, 40 to 50,000 was not a big number. When Xiangyu heard her agree so straightforwardly, she became a little suspicious. How could he be so generous? She thought that Yun Shirshir was going to make excuses. Once they arrived at their destination, Mushi was in charge of showing them around the house. Even though Xiangyu was still dissatisfied with it, under her repeated persuasion, she finally agreed to settle on this place. Mushi heaved a sigh of relief and completed her mission. Yun Shirshir and Mushi then moved their luggage up and sorted it out. She contacted the landlord, signed a lease contract and paid a year's rent. Because of this, she felt a little indignant. Shirshir, your relatives are really the best. As she spoke, she repeated her friend's overboard words to her. Yun Shirshir smiled lightly. All right, who doesn't have a few best relatives? Anyway, they were not going to spend the rest of their lives together. It was her fault. Chapter 1679. The more she spoke, the more agitated she felt for Shirshir. The more she thought about it, the more she felt aggrieved for her friend. On what basis? Shirshir had worked so hard to earn her salary from filming, yet because of these outrageous relatives of hers, they had to pay their rent for no reason. She knew that the three of them were poor, but was it reasonable for them to be poor? They clearly knew that the houses in the capital were expensive, yet they still insisted on coming here. Oh no, Shirshir was kind enough to pick out a house for them. She knew that the rent was expensive, yet she shamelessly asked for a house with a good location, a big house and a slightly lower floor. In the end, they even asked Shirshir to pay their rent for a year. Even if they were shameless, they couldn't be this shameless, right? They were clearly parasites. They wanted to eat Shirshir dry. Now that they're showing such unsightly behavior, who knew how much more trouble they would cause in the future? The more she spoke, the angrier she got. If she were Yun Shirshir, she would definitely make them pack up and leave. Yun Shirshir furrowed her brows, feeling uncomfortable inside. She then smiled and said, if I don't pay for them, the situation will only worsen. Anyway, it's not a big deal to settle a matter that can be settled with tens of thousands of yuan. It's just that, Mushi, it's been hard on you? Shirshir. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Mushi looked at her with exasperation. Yun Shirshir smiled. Don't worry. Just this once. Anyway, I've paid their rent for a year, so it's considered as being extremely benevolent. In the future, let's not interact with each other as much as possible. Only then did the assistant nod her head. After paying the rent and signing the contract, this matter was more or less settled. However, just as Yun Shirshir and her assistant were about to leave, Xiangyu called out, "Shirshir, leave now." She subconsciously narrowed her eyes. What is this bad woman up to now? Yun Shirshir, however, said, "I still have something on, so I'll take my leave first." Are Qingyao, Qinli, and I the only ones staying in this house? She suddenly thought of something. What about your father and uncle? Where are they staying? Yun Shirshir smiled. My dad and uncle are staying at my place, so it's convenient for my father to take care of him. Oh, how big is your house? Will there be enough space for so many people? Xiangyu couldn't help but think of a plan. She began to inquire about the information she had gathered. It's just enough. Yun Shirshir, however, was well aware of what her aunt was trying to find out. This time she gave an ambiguous answer out of consideration. Xiangyu suddenly squeezed over and bumped her elbow. She sneakily asked, "That's right? Auntie, it's not that I'm being nosy, but the man from yesterday, how's his family background?" Yun Shirshir's. What do you mean still? Xiangyu couldn't help but assume the attitude of an interrogator, throwing out a series of questions in rapid succession. She asked, "Are his parents still alive?" Yun Shirshir, she asked, "Does his family have a house?" Yun Shirshir, she continued, "I saw him driving a Mercedes-Benz yesterday. I heard from Qingyao that it's very expensive. It seems that his family background is not bad, right?" Yun Shirshir. She asked, "How's his job? How much is his annual salary? Is it 10,000 yuan?" Yun Shirshir. Chapter 1680. Xiangyu continued, "But auntie, this man is a little too handsome. Usually the more beautiful a man is, the easier it is for him to have an affair behind his wife's back. You have to be careful. Beautiful men are not reliable. They are easy to be targeted." Yun Shirshir frowned. To be honest, if Xiangyu's words were spoken by someone like her mother, it would be unpleasant to hear. However, it was sincere advice that grated on the ears. Her words were sincere as she was worried about her. What she said was reasonable. However, it was inappropriate for someone like her to say such words. It was inevitable that it would sow discord between them. Yun Shirshir curved her lips but was not in the mood to chat with her. Let nature take its course when it comes to relationships. Moreover, he treats me very well and I love him very much. In the future, I intend to hold his hand for the rest of my life. However, Xiangyu gave a strange smile and exhorted, "Shirshir, don't be shy. You have to keep your eyes open when looking for a man. Look, auntie is regretting it." Regretting it? Your uncle is too useless. I have suffered for half of my life when I was with him. Tell me, auntie is considered diligent. When I was young, I farmed and gave birth to his children. I worked in the fields during the day and came back at night to take care of the family. After a pause, Xiangyu poured out her grievances. "Shirshir, you should know. Your father went to the capital when he was young. When he was middle-aged, he also made a name for himself. But he did not take care of your hometown much. Your grandmother was mostly taken care of by auntie. Your uncle did not take care of much and did not care about anything. When he was young, he worked at the construction site and earned some money. However, when he got into an accident at the construction site, he fell and became handicapped for life. He did not get any compensation. When Qinli was in college, he was careless and even gave your family the money that was meant for Qinli's education." Xiangyu sighed as she said this. Qinli could not go to college, so she could only follow the Qingyao workers to work in the factory. The money was not much. It was not easy for her to come to the capital and she wanted to survive. As her elder sister, you should at least take care of her. These words were purposely said for Yun Shirshir to hear. There were only two things he wanted her to know. First, her father did not fulfill his filial duties in the early years, and she was the one who took care of him. Secondly, Qinli could not attend university because Yun Yeho had given all his money to Yun Yeqing during the Yun family's most difficult time. Third, Qinli didn't go to college, so she had to take care of her younger sister and find her a stable job. Yun Shirshir had a headache. She said, "When it comes to work, I have the will but not the power. Auntie, you don't have to worry. The children and grandchildren will have their own fortune. Qinli just needs to work hard and she will have her own development." On the side, Yun Qinli was a little unhappy when she heard this. She muttered, "If it weren't for you guys, I would also be a university student. Why did you go to university and I didn't? I asked you to take care of me but you refused." "Qinli." Xiangyu glared at her. Yun Qinli was so scared that she immediately shut up. She turned around to look at Yun Shirshir and laughed dryly. "Shirshir, don't take it to heart. Qinli is still young, don't bother with her." She was just saying this out of courtesy. Yun Shirshir was also a little angry. She smiled and said, "My younger sister is still young, don't blame her. I won't take it to heart." Chapter 1681. Xiangyu's expression turned ugly as well. She actually suffered a loss at her hands. Yun Shirshir put on a fake smile and said, "I have something on, so I'll take my leave first. Goodbye." With that, she made to leave. Just as she stepped out of the door, Yun Qingyao rushed out of the bedroom and grabbed Yun Shirshir's arm, asking in a panic, "Shirshir, Shirshir, is my luggage in your car?" "Your luggage isn't in my car." With that, Yun Shirshir raised a brow. "What's the matter now?" "I'm missing a piece of luggage. I wonder if I dropped it somewhere." When Yun Qinli heard that, she immediately became nervous. Is it your black suitcase?" "Yes. My wallet is in there. There's 1 or 2,000 yuan in cash in there." She was on the verge of tears. "Not only your wallet but mine and the clothes I brought over." She was like an ant on a hot pan as she spoke. "Did I bring it with me when I went to check out the rental?" "No. Could it be that you left it in the hotel?" With that, she pleaded, "Shirshir, can you bring me back to the hotel to check if it's there?" Yun Shirshir replied, "I still have something on later." She did not want to be a busybody and had no time to waste on them. Hence, Yun Shirshir took out a name card from her wallet and handed it over with an elegant smile. "The address of the hotel is here. You can take a taxi there." Yun Qingyao was stunned. "Can't you take me there?" "It's very expensive to take a taxi. It's cheaper than my gas bill." Yun Shirshir then frowned. "Qingyao, I don't have any cash on me. I've used all my money to pay for your rent. It shouldn't be a big problem for you to take a taxi, right?" With that, she bade farewell to Xiangyu and left with Mushi without looking back. The moment the door closed, Yun Qingyao was furious. How stingy. She's driving a Mercedes-Benz, so why is she feeling the pinch over the gas bill? How stingy. Yun Qinli also said angrily, "This Yun Shirshir is really something. You're driving a luxury car that's worth millions, but you're still worried about paying for a small amount of gas. Do you even treat us as family?" "Xiangyu, all right. Stop talking so much. Tidy up the room first. There are some things we can talk about later." She was obviously very angry. She walked to the sofa at the side and picked up the lease contract to take a look. A year's worth of rent would be paid in full. She had a new understanding of Yun Shirshir. It seemed that, this girl must have a lot of money on hand, right? He paid tens of thousands of yuan in one go without batting an eyelid. It seemed that he was rich. In the room, Yun Qingyao and Yun Qinli were tidying up their clothes while whispering to each other. "Qinli, did you hear Shirshir's friend mention it earlier? It seems like Wuxia said that Shirshir is filming with the crew." "Sis, I heard it too. Do you think Yun Shirshir is an actress?" "I suspect so. Look at her, she's so generous like a rich woman. She should have a lot of money on her. I heard that being an actress is very lucrative. Once you become famous, you can earn millions just by shooting a commercial." Yun Qinli was shocked speechless. "Really? Really? When have I ever lied to you?" Chapter 1682. If there's a chance, I'll ask her about it. If there's a chance, get me into the production team. Maybe one day when I become famous, I'll be able to earn a lot of money, live in a big villa and drive a Mercedes-Benz. Yun Qinli chuckled. She wanted to sit down and daydream. Yun Qingyao threw a pillow at her. "Enough. Tidy up your clothes." After the shareholders' meeting in Dishing, Mu Yaja had a video conference with the technical department of the American branch in his office. Afterward, he drove to Huanyu. Qinzhou had just finished his meeting when he bumped into him. "Chairman Mu?" Surprised, the manager could not help but feel a little suspicious. When he saw him, he immediately stood upright and meticulously. "Hello, Chairman Mu. Where did the wind come from to bring such a rare and honorable guest to this place?" Ever since the Mu Group acquired Huanyu, Mu Yaja, as the biggest boss behind the scenes, rarely showed his face in Huanyu. Huanyu's affairs were all handled by a few other senior executives. Now, it was a little strange. Why did this big boss, who was always busy, have the time to patrol here? Could he be here to inspect the work? Qinzhou was scheming in his heart as he smiled respectfully. "Ah, Chairman Mu, are you here to inspect the work?" Mu Yaja stood in front of him with one hand in his trouser pocket and the other hanging naturally by his side. Behind him, however, stood a group of Huanyu's top management, who were all dressed in suits and leather shoes. His sudden inspection of Huanyu's headquarters had obviously caught them off guard, so they followed behind him fearfully and exchanged glances. What kind of wind had blown him here? Mu Yaja glanced at Qinzhou. "Are you busy?" "No. Chairman Mu, I just finished a meeting here." After a pause, Qin Zhou smiled. What brings you here, Chairman Mu? Show me Yun Shishir's schedule. Hearing this, the smile on Qin Zhou's face froze slightly. He roughly understood the purpose of his visit, so he respectfully welcomed him into the office. By the time Mu Yaja sat down on the sofa, a row of people was already standing at the door. Among them, several of Huan Yu's higher-ups were trembling in fear as they approached him. Just as they were about to speak, he waved his hand and said with a cold face, "Get back to work." "Yes. Chairman Mu, do you have any other instructions?" The leader of the group had a fawning look on his face. Mu Yaja frowned and gave him a sidelong glance. "Did you not understand what I said?" Yes, I understand. I'll go back to work now. I won't disturb you any longer." After saying that, the people at the door immediately retreated, leaving the door empty. Qin Zhou took out a stack of documents and spread them out on the table in front of him. Mu Yaja casually picked up a document and glanced through it. His eyes flashed with a hint of coldness. Crash! With a wave of his hand, the snow-white documents scattered like snowflakes. Qin Zhou was stunned. "Why did you arrange such a packed schedule for her?" Mu Yaja was very dissatisfied. He stared coldly at Qin Zhou and said in an icy tone, "No wonder she's been especially busy recently. She'll be on the set for half a month. Do you have to arrange such a tight schedule for her?" Qin Zhou lowered his head and kept his mouth shut, not saying a word. It seemed that a certain big boss was obviously not satisfied with what he wanted. Chairman Mu. Chapter 1683. Chairman Mu, forgive me for being blunt, but Shishir is a good actress. She is very talented, so I have great ambitions for her. I hope that she can become the youngest double Best Actress winner in history. Now that her career is on the rise, it is the busiest time. She still has a lot of free time, so I am also trying to adjust it. Mu Yaja did not agree with him. Since she likes acting, then let her do her best. But there is no need to talk about acting. She can't even take care of her family. He stood up, walked in front of Qin Zhou and looked down at him from above. In the future, no matter what resources or roles she wants, you have to report to me. I will arrange it. Qin Zhou was stunned. Mu Yaja's meaning was obvious. He was going to use his resources to support Shishir. If Mu Yaja could pave the way, then Shishir would have a lot of resources in the future. However, unexpectedly, Mu Yaja paused and changed the topic. But some unimportant publicity should be avoided. I don't want her to be exposed to the public too much. Chairman Mu, some publicity was necessary. How could it be avoided? Mu Yaja narrowed his eyes. His gaze was dangerous. You should understand what I mean. I don't like my woman being coveted by others. I don't like the entertainment industry. I don't want her to be tainted by those dirty things. He liked her pure and untainted nature. Hence he wanted to protect her well. Qin Zhou, I used to believe in your ability, so I am not worried when she is in your hands. But now, I have to remind you of something. Mu Yaja paused. His gaze was piercingly cold and piercing as it fell on Qin Zhou's face. It was as sharp as an icicle. Some men are not allowed to get close to her as long as there is a little distance between them. I don't like my woman being coveted by other men, even if it is just a glance. Do you understand? Qin Zhou was shocked. He raised his head and looked at Mu Yaja in shock. Chairman Mu, Qin Zhou, you are very smart. You should understand what I mean. Mu Yaja narrowed his eyes slightly. Gu Xingze is an artist that you used to manage. For your sake, I won't be calculative about the past. But I came here today to tell you that Shishir is my legitimate wife. No one is allowed to touch her. If this happens again, I won't give you any face. Don't think that just because he has the support of the Gu family he can be fearless. How dare he try to go against me? He's not worthy. He did not want to waste any time on Gu Xingze. However, if Gu Xingze couldn't understand the situation and wanted to hit a rock with an egg, he might as well show him that there were some people he couldn't afford to offend. When it came to relationships, he especially cherished them. Especially when it came to Yun Shishir. It was not easy for him to be able to be with her. He cherished her even more. At the same time, as a responsible man, he would not let her suffer any grievances. For her, he would remain loyal. But at the same time, he also hoped that she would cherish their marriage and their relationship. More than that, he did not want this relationship to be destroyed or disturbed by anyone. He had a serious obsession with cleanliness, both physically and mentally. Chapter 1684. As soon as Mu Yaja finished speaking, Qin Zhou's eyes widened in shock as he stared at him in disbelief. What? Chairman Mu had just said that Shishir was his legal wife. Could it be that they were already married? Why didn't he know about this? When did this happen? Why didn't Shirshir tell him about this? As Qin Zhou's mind raced, Mu Yaja spoke again. Of course, I'm not referring to Gu Xingze alone. After a pause, his voice suddenly deepened. I heard that there's an artist with an extraordinary background in her crew. He seems to have some ulterior motives towards her. Oh. Qin Zhou instinctively asked. After a moment of silence, he realized something. Chairman Mu, are you talking about Hua Jin? Don't worry about this. I've already told Shirshir to stay away from Hua Jin. Hua Jin shouldn't cause trouble for her. Haha. Mu Yaja frowned. I heard that Hua Jin is causing trouble in the crew. I don't care about this, but if he provokes someone he shouldn't provoke. He couldn't just sit back and do nothing about this. Qin Zhou was a little surprised when he heard this. He glanced at him cautiously and understood what he meant. Qin Zhou had some idea about the role of Hua Jin. Qin Zhou had inquired about him from various sources and made up for his homework. It was said that Hua Jin debuted in the film and television industry with the stage name Hua Jin when he was 16 years old. With his outstanding looks, he quickly stood out in the industry. However, as a newcomer, Hua Jin didn't have many good resources. Most of the time he was a supporting actor. He rarely had the chance to get a lead role. Although he was naturally good-looking and had good acting skills, he quickly gained a lot of fans. Later on, he won the male lead role in a TV drama. With that drama, his acting career skyrocketed. It was quite similar to Gu Xingze's overnight popularity 10 years ago. However, it was said that he was able to win the male lead role in this drama because he had successfully used his character to enter the Beijing Circle. The entertainment industry was divided into 4 major circles. The Beijing Circle, Hong Kong Circle, Shanghai Circle, and Northeast Circle. Among them, the Beijing Circle was divided into 3 groups: Ren-yi Beijing Film Academy and the Beijing Circle. The so-called Beijing Circle referred to the Beijing film and television industry. But anyone who could get into the Beijing Circle and make a name for themselves would not be able to cross the threshold without a financial backer behind them. It was said that the person behind Hua Jin was very mysterious and had a powerful background. Qin Zhou knew who that person was. In the entertainment industry, Hua Jin was known for being a playboy. He often got entangled with many female celebrities and had many ambiguous affairs with them. Every female lead actress who acted with him would have some scandals with him. No one could stop him from taking the initiative. He had a naturally enchanting face and was a classic handsome man. No matter which woman it was, they would be moved by his beauty and fall into his gentle trap. However, without exception, all the female stars who had entangled with him were quickly frozen or banned after filming that movie. They had disappeared from the circle since then. Among these female celebrities, there were also many who came from powerful backgrounds, but they were all banned with a single sentence. One could only imagine how much power the mysterious sugar daddy behind Hua Jin wielded in the capital's social circle. That was why no one, including Gu Xiaoyang, dared to offend him. Chapter 1685. However, unlike those actresses in the past, Yun Shirshir did not try to avoid Hua Jin whenever possible. This, however, left him dissatisfied. It seemed that this woman would not let him be at ease after all. She can film in the production team in the future. However, you have to send her home once she's done. Do you understand? Mu Yaja reminded him. He was worried about leaving his woman in the production team. Qin Zhou hesitated for a moment but eventually gave in and nodded. All right, I understand what you mean. I'll do as you say. I'll leave my woman's career to you, so you have to be careful. If she gets hurt again, I'll hold you responsible. Qin Zhou nodded repeatedly in agreement. Don't worry, Chairman Mu. I was careless in the past, but I'll take good care of her from now on. She loves acting and cherishes this job very much. Mu Yaja paused for a moment before continuing. If she wants to work behind the scenes in the future, you can pave the way for her in this aspect. When the time is right, she'll set up a film and television company. It'll be a good choice for you to take charge of the overall situation. Putting aside other aspects, Mu Yaja had high hopes for Qin Zhou's capabilities. If Yun Shirshir decided to work behind the scenes and set up a film and television company in the future, Qin Zhou would be one of his generals. Feeling flattered, Qin Zhou smiled and said, It's my honor that Chairman Mu thinks so highly of me. I won't let you down. Yun Shirshir drove home. Under Yun Yeqing's request, she made an appointment with a Chinese medicine specialist to send Yun Yeho to the hospital. When Yun Yeho was crippled back then, he did not receive any treatment and simply returned home to recuperate. After a diagnosis, the doctor regretfully expressed that if he could have gone to the hospital in time for surgery and undergone vigorous rehabilitation, there was still a chance for him to stand up again. However, after so many years he was bedridden and the muscles in his legs had atrophied. From then on, there was no hope for him to stand up again. Hearing this, Yun Yeqing felt as if a knife was being twisted in his heart. He felt even more ashamed toward this younger brother of his. If it were not for him back then, if it weren't for the Yun family's mishap, Yun Yeho wouldn't have given him all his savings in order to help him, and he wouldn't have ended up crippled for life. According to the doctor, this kind of surgery was not very difficult. In the county, it would cost at most 30,000 yuan to cure the leg. However, after Yun Yeho was injured, the foreman ran away with the money and didn't get a single cent for compensation, nor did he get an explanation. After secretly giving all his savings to Yun Yeqing, he thought that his legs were useless, so he went home after a simple treatment. Apart from his legs, Yun Yeqing also did other checkups on his brother, and the report was only released the next day. Once they were out of the hospital and in the car, Yun Yeqing secretly wiped his tears sadly. As Yun Shishir steered the car, she caught sight of her father's gloomy face through the rearview mirror. She smiled and said, "Dad, don't be sad. Everything will be fine." "It's all because of me," Yun Yeqing sighed. "It's all because of me that his legs are crippled." "Brother, don't say that. Now that I can see that you and Shishir are doing well, I'm already satisfied." Yun Yeho gave a simple and honest smile, but his face revealed an honest and gratified smile. Yun Shishir had mixed feelings about this. Once they reached home, under the repeated pleas of Yun Yeqing and Yun Yeho, Yun Shishir drove them out to look for a house. Chapter 1686. However, Yun Yeqing said that since they were already married, they should not disturb them. Yun Yeqing planned to find a place to settle down first before finding a job to take care of Yun Yeho while earning money from his part-time job. He had already discussed this with Yun Shishir, so she could not reject him. His only request was that he had limited capabilities. After all, he had to take care of his son while working. When he was not at home, he hoped that Yun Shishir could find a nanny to take good care of him. Yun Shishir agreed to it. They found a dormitory not far from the factory. The rent was not high. After negotiating the contract, he insisted on paying the rent himself. It would not be too late to move the luggage tomorrow. On the way home he asked, "Shishir, since you've registered your marriage with him, when do you plan to get married?" Married meant that they were going to hold a wedding. He was obviously anxious for her when he asked for her opinion. Initially he was a little skeptical, feeling that he could not see through the man's character. He did not know if the latter was sincere to his daughter or if he was here to deceive her. As an elderly man, he was protective of his daughter, so it was natural for him to be suspicious. However, when he found out today that this lad had brought Yun Shishir to the Civil Affairs Bureau to register their marriage, he understood everything at once. This lad was probably using his actions to declare to him that he was sincere to his daughter because of his suspicions and probing yesterday. At least he was responsible. Putting everything else aside, just this point alone was enough for him to fully approve of this female candidate. Yun Shishir was stunned for a moment before she said slowly, "Dad, I'm not ready yet. The matter of registering our marriage is very sudden. Even now, I still feel like I'm dreaming." She could not believe that she had really become Muyaja's wife. It was perfectly justifiable. She had never dared to dream of having a family. Now that this dream was about to come true, she began to worry about her gains and losses. It was not that she did not believe in Muyaja. She believed in his promise. It was just that, perhaps he was too perfect for her to believe that she could have him all to herself. Sigh. "Shishir, how can you think like that?" Yun Shishir disagreed with her statement and retorted, "You love to let your imagination run wild. Shishir, you are a good child. Father believes in you. You will definitely be happy in this life." Yun Shishir smiled shyly and was a little distracted. She couldn't help but imagine what her wedding with Muyaja would be like. Every girl had many beautiful fantasies about their wedding. She was no exception. Everyone hoped to be the happiest bride in the world on that day. She was even more so. Yun Yeqing muttered to himself as he urged, "Shishir, even if you're not in a hurry, you should get engaged first. An engagement ceremony is a must. Why don't I pick a good day for you to hold the engagement ceremony first? What do you think?" "I haven't asked for his opinion yet. When he comes back tonight, I'll ask him what he thinks." "Good child." Yun Yeqing nodded approvingly. Husband and wife should be like this. They should discuss everything. You can ask for his opinion later and see what he has in mind. Chapter 1687. As he spoke, his face was flushed with happiness. It was as if Shishir's engagement was happier than him marrying off his daughter. Yun Yeho liked Shishir very much. Perhaps, from a certain point of view, he liked and doted on her more than his two daughters. It wasn't that he was biased and his elbow was on the outside. It was just that humans were made of flesh. He loved his family, but he was not blind. There was no need to talk about Jianghu. Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli, on the other hand, were unfilial. Therefore, his heart was already dead and he did not miss his two daughters much. Both Yun Yeqing and Yun Yeho encouraged her to set the wedding date as soon as possible. The wedding might not be urgent, but the engagement ceremony must be held with dignity. Being able to personally hand his daughter over to a man he trusted could also be considered as fulfilling one of his wishes. As Yun Shishir agreed, she wondered if Mu Yaja had considered this matter or if he had already made arrangements. That night, when Yun Shishir reached home, she gave Mu Yaja a call. However, the other party said that he still had some matters to attend to and might be back late, so they did not have to wait for him for dinner. His voice was deep and hurried over the phone, and there seemed to be someone else talking on the other end. It seemed that he was in a meeting. He was probably the only one who had the privilege to pick up the phone in a meeting when there was no one around, and he didn't hide it from anyone. She could not help but mutter inwardly, "Why are there so many meetings?" Just as she finished muttering, she was stunned for a moment before replying, "You go ahead with your work." With that, she hung up the phone. After hanging up the phone, Yun Shishir felt a sense of emptiness in her heart. Suddenly she felt a little disappointed. Today was their wedding day after all. They had happily collected their marriage certificate in the morning, and at night she was eagerly waiting for her newlywed husband to come home for dinner. However, he said that he would be busy with work and would be back late. Inevitably, she felt a little disappointed. She had become a lookout for her husband. However, despite her disappointment, she was not dissatisfied. After all, he had pushed aside all his work for the past 2 days for her sake. It was indeed a waste of time to focus on all his work today. It could not be helped that he would be back late. This was his job and she should respect it, just like how he respected her work. Yu prepared dinner and the whole family enjoyed it in harmony. While Yun Yeqing was full of praise for Yu's culinary skills, he also reproached Yun Shishir for making him do the housework at such a young age. Yu retorted, "Grandpa, you can't talk about mommy like that. I volunteered to do the housework. I'm very willing to do housework for mommy. I feel very satisfied to be able to share her burden." Yun Yeho was touched by his son's obedience and couldn't help but compare the two of them in his heart. Yu was only 7 years old, but he was already so sensible and filial. Look at his two daughters. So, forget it. It was the father's fault for not teaching the child well. She couldn't blame anyone. Looking at the obedient Yu, she could only be envious. After dinner, Yu and Xiao Yichen went to the kitchen to clean up the mess. Under Yu's guidance, Xiao Yichen gradually developed hands-on skills. Washing the dishes and mopping the floor were no longer a problem for him. He could even clean up very well. Yun Shishir then tidied up the living room and study. In the blink of an eye, it was already late at night. After coaxing the children to sleep, Yun Yeqing also took care of Yun Yeho. Chapter 1688. It was already 8 o'clock. She was still worried, so she made another call. Actually, she hesitated for a long time about whether she should make this call or not. What if he was still busy? Would she be disturbing him? However, she really wanted to know if he was still busy. Hence, she mustered up her courage and dialed his number. Mu Yaja picked up the call. He would never miss any of her calls, no matter what he was doing. It had become a habit for him to pick up her calls in a timely manner. Over the phone, Mu Yaja's voice sounded slightly tired and hoarse. From the sound of it, he seemed to still be in the middle of a meeting. Still in a meeting? A meeting that lasted from 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock. Yun Shishir sighed again and again. Mu Yaja said, "I'll probably be very late. You should rest first. Don't wait for me. Come back early." After Yun Shishir finished speaking, she hung up the phone and sat on the sofa in the living room. Although she was very sleepy, she didn't feel like going back to her room to rest at all. Just today alone, she really wanted to wait for him to come home. However, this phone call had also taught her the meaning of putting herself in someone else's shoes. The process of maturity was gradually learning to put oneself in someone else's shoes. Now, it turned out that waiting for him to come home was such an anxious and uneasy matter. It turned out that she was really worried and missed him when he came home so late. Similarly, she had been on set for so long and rarely called him in half a month. He must have missed her that much too, right? Hence, on the night of the proposal, before they even entered the hotel, he had hugged her so tightly. It was as if he had poured all the longing that he had accumulated for more than half a month into his arms. He couldn't bear to let go. He had hugged her into the room and entered her so eagerly. He had been hungry for more. He must have missed her so much that he had gone crazy all night. When she thought about it this way, she had really gone overboard. No matter how busy work was, it couldn't be an excuse to neglect home. That was why he had asked her not to work and to stay at home so that he could take care of her. She actually didn't understand what he meant. As Yun Shusher thought about it, she felt extremely guilty. She hugged her knees and buried her face in her arms. She felt so bad that she wanted to cry. Looking out the window, it was already late at night. But the more she waited, the less sleepy she felt. The waiting time was so long, minute by minute, second by second. It was as if the clock had been delayed. Even though it felt like a century had passed, only a quarter of an hour had passed. She blamed herself for being so pretentious. They had just met in the morning. How could she miss him so much in just half a day? When she was on set, had he also waited for her so bitterly? Yun Shusher could not help but imagine a scene in her mind. In the meeting room, Mu Yaja sat at the head of the table. He looked exhausted, but he still sat up straight and listened to the meeting report. Just thinking about it made him feel tired. Even if he didn't do anything, his body wouldn't be able to take it after sitting in a chair for more than 4 hours. While worrying, he waited anxiously. Until midnight at 10:30, there was the sound of car horns outside the door. Then there was the sound of a car slowly parking in the garage. A few minutes later, when Mu Yaja opened the door and walked in, there was a light at the entrance. He threw the keys on the cabinet. Just as he took off his jacket and hung it on the hanger, the sound of his movements woke Yun Shusher, who was dozing off on the sofa. "You're back." Chapter 1689. Mu Yaja was stunned. He looked in the direction of the sound and turned on the lights in the living room. The lights in the living room lit up. She had been in the dark for a long time, so she couldn't adapt to the sudden bright light. She covered her eyes, and the dazzling light made her more clear-headed. She hurriedly pulled on her slippers, stood up, and said somewhat uneasily, You're home. I've been waiting for you for a long time." Mu Yaja glanced at her. She seemed to have taken a shower. She was wearing thick pajamas and her hair was draped over her shoulders. Just by looking at her, he seemed to be able to smell the shower fragrance on her body. However, when he saw the tired look on her face, he was slightly angry. "Didn't I tell you to sleep first? I clearly told you that I'll be home very late." Yun Shusher was shocked by him. She didn't expect that after waiting for so long, he would be so angry that he would reprimand her. For a moment she didn't know what to do. She stood there uneasily, afraid that any movement would anger him. "What's wrong with you?" He gave off a feeling that he was very irritable. When Mu Yaja saw that she seemed to be frightened, he immediately kept the cold expression on his face. He looked away and calmed down. He explained, "I didn't mean to scold you. I'm just a little tired. I'm a little angry to see that you've been waiting for me for so long." After that, he sat down at the dining table with a tired face. However, his complexion was a little bad. "I'm sorry to have worried you." Yun Shusher paused. She saw that he was frowning, his face was pale, and his eyebrows were tightly knitted. She couldn't help but feel nervous. "What's wrong?" Yun Shusher went up to him and said, "You don't seem to be feeling well." Mu Yaja didn't force himself and said, "My stomach hurts a little." The meeting at 4 in the afternoon lasted until 10. Because of a conflict in a case, the meeting was in a deadlock. Even when the meeting ended, they couldn't resolve it perfectly. For a full 6 hours he still hadn't finished his meal. When the meeting ended, he didn't feel well, so he didn't stay in the office and drove home. When Yun Shusher heard that his stomach wasn't feeling well, she asked worriedly, "Did you not have dinner?" "Yes." He only ate a little for lunch. His schedule from today to tomorrow was packed, and he had no time to think about dinner. When Yun Shusher heard this, she immediately said, "Wait, I'll cook some noodles for you." Mu Yaja looked up and wanted to stop her, but she had already rushed into the kitchen, turned on the lights and started the fire. He took a few deep breaths and then smiled. Even though he felt a little heartache and a little angry when he saw that she had to wait for him so late at night, but to be honest, there was someone silently waiting for him when he returned in the middle of the night. Moreover, she considerately left a lamp on for him. This kind of feeling was both warm and blissful. There was a kind of warmth of home. Warmth? He hadn't used that word in a long time. However, this woman gave him such a feeling. Warmth. This was probably the greatest meaning of marriage. To be able to spend the rest of his life with the woman he loved was the happiest thing in the world. Everything else wasn't important. 15 minutes later, Yun Shusher brought out the noodles. After she presented it to him, she sat down opposite him and rested her chin on her hands. She smiled and said, "Eat. Try my cooking. You said that you've improved." Chapter 1690. Yun Shirshir stared at him in a daze. She liked looking at him like this. He was so handsome when he smiled. The moment he lowered his head, he was gentle and dashing. At that moment she felt a surge of emotions in her heart. This is my man. This is my husband, my hubby, the person I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. At this thought she suddenly recalled Yun Yeqing's words. He urged her to ask him when the marriage was going to be settled. Yun Shirshir knitted her brows. She wanted to ask, but when the words reached her lips she swallowed them back down. Somehow she felt that if she were to ask that, she would appear a little too unreserved. While she was letting her imagination run wild, Wuxia had already finished half a bowl of noodles. He ate quietly and elegantly. Even in such a sophisticated environment, he did not make a single sound. He was just like an upper-class aristocrat. She did not notice it at all. When she turned to look and saw that he had already eaten so much, she hurriedly asked, "How is it? Is my culinary skills okay?" He simply replied, "I'm not commenting." Yun Shirshir. What? Is my culinary skills bad? Wuxia raised his eyes to look at her and then reluctantly said, "The taste is not bad. Not bad, not bad, not bad." These three words were the most typical perfunctory words. Yun Shirshir instantly deflated like a balloon. She felt that she was still far from being a virtuous wife. What's wrong? Wuxia saw the disappointment in her eyes and smiled. "I thought that you've already accepted your lack of talent in cooking. Don't you know that your words are very hurtful?" Wuxia nodded seriously. The truth is usually hard to listen to. Yun Shirshir said angrily, "If it's not good, then don't force yourself to eat it." With that she reached for the bowl. Wuxia grabbed her hand. "What are you doing?" Yun Shirshir pouted. "Didn't you say that my culinary skills are terrible? Then don't force yourself. Since it's so hard to eat, then don't eat it." Wuxia said, "You stupid woman. You don't know anything else, but you're good at distorting the meaning of others." Yun Shirshir retorted, "Then what do you mean? I didn't say that your culinary skills are terrible. I only said that your culinary skills are average. After all, compared to Yuyu's superb culinary skills, his mother's culinary skills, which were considered mediocre, could hardly catch his eye." "Sorry, I don't have any culinary skills." With that said, she made a move to snatch the bowl. Wuxia refused to let her go though. He exerted force in his arm and pulled her into his embrace. Shirshir's Yun, Shirshir's at Shirshir at Mu, Mu at Shirshir at Mu, Shirshir was Shirshir's, Mu was Mu. He lowered his head and gently held her face. His thin lips curled into a smile, but it was an extremely doting smile. "Madam?" He spoke softly and called her so gently. His mellow and slightly hoarse voice was like a fine wine that had been sealed for half a year. It was extremely magnetic, and anyone who heard it could not help but be intoxicated. Yun Shirshir's heart stopped for a moment. Even though there was no trace of it in his voice, there was still an undetectable tenderness. This tenderness was unprecedented. And because of those two words that were extremely intimate, it added a sense of indulgence. Yun Shirshir was stunned. He saw that she was stunned and was slightly displeased. "What? You don't like this name?" "No." Chapter 1691. Why wasn't she reserved at all? He was just trying to scare her, but she was actually so... Yun Shirshir's face turned slightly red, but she was a little shy. She gently bit her lips and then said shyly, "Hubby, are you done eating?" Wuxia smiled. He liked to see her shy look the most, especially when she was in his arms. Her shy expression was like a shy flower bud waiting to bloom, beautiful as ever. He lowered his head and whispered into her ear, "I'm done eating." His warm breath brushed against her ear. It was hot and itchy and he couldn't stop rubbing against her. She pushed him and struggled for a moment before squirming out of his arms. Then she glared at him coquettishly, picked up the bowl and walked into the kitchen. Wuxia got up and followed her into the kitchen. There was a warm light in the kitchen. Yun Shirshir put the bowl in the sink and started to wash it. He walked behind her and gently hugged her waist. He rested his chin on her shoulder and quietly watched her wash. Beside his ears was the sound of the warm water flowing quietly. His eyes were half opened. His tense mood for the entire day was finally relieved at this moment. "Can you not lean on me?" Yun Shirshir said gloomily. "What's wrong?" "It's so heavy." Yun Shirshir paused and complained, "Hubby, are you too thin? It hurts when your chin pokes me." Wuxia deliberately went against her and used more strength. It hurt so much that Yun Shirshir sucked in a breath of cold air. She finally understood that having a sharp chin that could poke people to death was not a joke. Wuxia didn't have an oval face, but his facial features were well defined. His chin was thin and his lines were proud. It hurt a little when he leaned on her shoulder. Go take a shower first. I'll tidy up. Okay. With that, Mu Yaja went into the bathroom. Yun Shirshir returned to the room after washing the dishes. She put the pajamas in the bathroom and returned to the bedroom. Half an hour later, Mu Yaja entered the room in a bathrobe. Hubby, come here. Yun Shirshir sat at the head of the bed and waved at him. When he came closer, she stretched out her arms and hooked them around his shoulders like a lazy cat. When he sat on the edge of the bed, her soft body leaned on him. A pair of white wrists clasped onto his shoulders, and her tender little face incomparably rolled up the curtains and pressed against his shoulder. She just hugged him like this but didn't say anything. In this tranquil moment, holding him made her feel incomparably at ease. Time was peaceful. She was extremely satisfied, so she couldn't help but rub her face against his shoulder again and again like a spoiled kitten. Her jet black hair was draped over his shoulders. It was as smooth as the finest brocade. It was unbelievably beautiful. Immersed in this beautiful moment, even his heartbeat calmed down for a moment. She was so adorable and charming. In his eyes, she was pleasing to the eye. Just looking at her made him think that he should love this woman even more and hold her in the palm of his hand. He couldn't let her suffer the slightest grievance. He wanted to give her the best of everything in the world. Even the stars in the sky, he wanted to pluck them down and present them to her. The best decision he had ever made in his life was to marry her. Chapter 1692. Madam, have you thought about our wedding? He asked gently, taking the initiative to bring up this topic. She was a little surprised as she lifted her head and looked at him. She had thought that the reason why he had asked her to register their marriage today was just a spur-of-the-moment decision. After registering their marriage, he had immersed himself in work and only returned home very late. Hence, she had thought that he had thrown his thoughts about marriage to the back of his mind. Hearing him mention it, she was inevitably surprised. Have you thought about it? Mu Yaja nodded. After pondering for a moment, he said, I have thought about it, but it's mainly based on your thoughts. My thoughts? Mu Yaja thought to himself, women will definitely want to have full control over their wedding. Girls will have many romantic fantasies about their weddings, so she will probably have a lot of ideas about it. In comparison, his romantic cells were really dead. He would rather take her opinion into consideration. Yun Shirshir asked, My dad has been urging me to get engaged, but I'm actually not in a hurry for the wedding. Let's not prepare so hastily. What do you think? Mu Yaja nodded. I'm actually not in a hurry for the wedding. It's better to do it later. After a pause, as if he was afraid that she would misunderstand, he said, Don't let your imagination run wild. The reason why I said that I'm not in a hurry is because I have my own considerations. Although registering our marriage is simple, there are many things that we have to pay attention to when it comes to our wedding. Our wedding must be grand just like I promised you. On that day, I will announce to the world that you are my bride. Yun Shirshir was stunned for a moment. Her heart was slightly moved by his words. Mu Yaja lowered his head and gently kissed the corner of her lips. Following which, he said, Shirshir, I promised you that I would give you the wedding of the century. Do you remember? I remember. I remember everything you said. Mu Yaja smiled slightly. Although the wedding is not in a hurry, there are two things that I will arrange as soon as possible. Yun Shirshir couldn't help feeling puzzled and asked curiously, What are the two things? The first one is an engagement. Mu Yaja continued, I already have a preliminary idea about the engagement ceremony. I plan to hold our engagement ceremony on the island. After all, I hoped that the engagement would not be disturbed by any media, and I did not want to make a big fuss and hold it with only relatives and friends. After the engagement ceremony, I will hold a press conference to announce our marriage. However, I will keep your identity a secret for the time being and will not reveal it to the public. You're a public figure now. Announcing our marriage too early will only bring you unnecessary trouble. Do you understand? Yun Shirshir nodded in a daze. Even though she did not understand why he did this, she understood his decision. In fact, Mu Yaja couldn't wait to let the whole world know about their engagement. However, it was impossible. Firstly, he decided to arrange the engagement ceremony as soon as possible. After all, what she hoped for was to give her and her family an explanation. Secondly, if the engagement ceremony was held in the near future, then it would definitely cause a sensation in the Mu family and cause unnecessary trouble. Before he settled those troublesome people in the Mu family, he would not reveal her identity to the public. Chapter 1693. Then, besides this, what's the other thing? She asked. Mu Yaja looked down at her and said slowly, I've decided to announce Yu's identity to the Mu family. As soon as he finished speaking, Yun Shirshir looked at him. Her eyes were filled with shock and surprise. Then there was a faint joy in her eyes. You've decided to announce his identity? Yes. Mu Yaja nodded. It's been 7 years. Since we're already married, I don't want to wait any longer. But, then Yun Shirshir was a little worried. You said that you want to announce Yu's identity. I'm very happy. At least he can stand beside you openly and call you Daddy, without any qualms. He doesn't have to bear the title of an illegitimate son anymore. But, if we announce Yu's identity to the Mu family, will they really accept him? They have to accept him whether they want to or not. There's no room for negotiation. Mu Yaja's tone was very firm. There was no room for negotiation. Yu is the heir that I've decided on. He's also the candidate to be the head of the Mu family. No one can question the person that I've decided on. His domineering style was undoubtedly reflected at this moment. Yun Shirshir was surprised, happy and touched. She seemed to have waited for this moment for too long. She was really happy for Yu to stand beside him as his son. That was great. Yu could finally call him Daddy openly. Finally, he didn't have to be pointed at by other children and suspected of being an illegitimate son. But you said that Yu is the heir that you've decided on? Then, what about Xiao Yichen? Xiao Yichen isn't suitable. Mu Yaja smiled but did not say anything. Yu was a business genius. She was smart and talented at such a young age. She was able to bring a toy company from the brink of death back to life and turn it into a business empire in just 2 years. This was truly shocking. Little Yichen, on the other hand, was not just lacking in this aspect. There was no doubt that his talent in business was not as good as Yu's. Therefore, choosing Yu as the successor of Mu Group was a decision he had made after careful consideration. However, he suddenly thought of something. He frowned and said hesitantly, "It's just that. I have no choice but to accommodate you. In the Mu Jia, I may not mention your identity for the time being. Let's keep the matter of our marriage a secret for now." "Don't worry." Yun Shirshir thought for a moment and then smiled gently. "I'm willing to wait for you." He had promised to give her a sensational wedding of the century. She believed him and was willing to wait for that day to come. She wasn't looking forward to the sensational wedding of the century. Instead, she was looking forward to the moment when she officially placed her hand in his palm as his bride. She was willing to wait. Moreover, she was still filming. It wouldn't be too late to arrange the wedding after her career had stabilized. Moreover, he had already proposed to her. The wedding wouldn't be too far away. She could afford to wait. Since she had decided to spend the rest of her life with him, she had to trust him unconditionally. Good girl? Mu Yaja kissed her eyebrows. He didn't hide the affection in his eyes. Chapter 1694. She smiled. Her eyes were like crescent moons, and they seemed to be filled with countless little stars. It was a mesmerizing sight. He hugged her and covered both of them with the blanket. Then he switched off the lights. He gently covered her body, and for the rest of the time, he let his body and mind sink into it. It was undeniable that Mu Yaja's actions were extremely decisive. The night before, he had promised Yun Shirshir that he would announce Yu's identity to the Mu family. However, the next day he picked Yu up from school and drove straight back to the Mu family's house. On the way, Yu changed into a small suit. He wore a white shirt, black overalls and an elegant blazer. He looked like a noble little gentleman. He sat in the car calmly. When he heard that Mu Yaja had decided to announce his identity to the Mu family, he agreed without hesitation. That was because he did not care about anything else. He was satisfied to be able to stand beside his daddy in a dignified manner. However, when the car slowly drove into the Mu family's house, his heartbeat suddenly became erratic. Yu sat on Mu Yaja's lap and could not help but feel nervous. Will those people from the Mu family really approve of him? He was afraid that they would not. Everyone knew who he was. If his daddy announced his identity to those people, it would cause a huge uproar. Those sly old foxes in the Mu family were very scheming. Their internal interests were very complicated and involved a lot of things. What they cared about was not who he was, but who the woman behind him was. He was afraid that this time around it would definitely be a bloodbath. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a hangmen banquet. When the car stopped at the entrance, Mu Yaja carried him out of the car. However, he suddenly noticed that his son's eyes were a little blank. His little hands were cold and sweaty. What's wrong? Nervous? He could not help but tease him. Nervous? When Yu heard that, he broke into a smile. His eyes were deep. Daddy, you're joking. How could he be nervous? Ah. My son is not someone who has stage fright. Mu Yaja smiled and carried him into the main hall of the Mu family's main residence. At this moment all the members of the Mu family as well as the elders of the side branches were present. Mu Xing was there too. However, he had been recuperating in the villa recently. Yesterday, when he found out that Mu Yaja had something important to announce in public and even gathered all the important figures of the Mu family, he also wanted to be there to see what was so important to announce. The members of the Mu family who had been waiting anxiously for a long time were originally gathered together and discussing animatedly. They didn't know why Mu Yaja suddenly gathered everyone. However, when they saw Mu Yaja carrying a little munchkin into the main hall, everyone was stunned. Xiaoyi Chen. Mu Shumin was the first to speak. She carefully observed the child for a while, but she felt that there was something wrong with this child. Mu Linfeng suddenly frowned and said in a deep voice, "This child isn't Mu Yichen." What? Mu Shumin on the other hand was taken aback. Her probing gaze then landed on Yu once more. She sized him up from head to toe with her bewildered gaze as if she wanted to stare right through him. Chapter 1695. These people, who had been in the center of power for many years and had been involved in bloodshed, were all very experienced. They might not be able to tell if it was the same person at first glance, but at second glance they could tell that something was fishy. This little guy was obviously not Mu Yichen. Then, could he be the child of the Mu family who had been left outside? They heard that his name was Yun Tianyu. Mu Shumin did not know about Yun Tianyu's matter. It was only after Mu Yanqing added a few words that she realized what was going on. However, this was followed by a sense of vigilance. This child was an outsider in her eyes. She would not accept it. Although Yun Tianyu was Mu Yaja's flesh and blood, logically speaking, it should be a joyous occasion for the Mu family to regain this lost child. However, looking at the current Mu family, no one would think so. Why? This was because this child had led a wandering life outside the family since he was young and was not close to the Mu family. In addition, the woman behind him had always been the Mu family's public enemy. A family like the Mu family was quite xenophobic towards a woman who had no power and no family background. If Yun Shishir had some background and a powerful maternal family, she might be able to gain their approval. However, Yun Shishir did not have any background, so she was seen as an outsider in their eyes. As such, this child would not be recognized by them either. Yu allowed Mu Yaja to carry her as her beautiful eyes scanned the main hall. She took in all the wariness, suspicion, and malicious looks. She mentally prepared herself. The eyes of these people didn't seem to be very friendly. It was as if an ancient and powerful tribe had seen an invading enemy. They were glaring at her covetously with a hint of hostility. It seemed that he was not welcome here. Still, it did not matter. He was here this time because he had promised his daddy. His daddy told him that he would bring him back to the Mu family and announce his identity. The little lad's first reaction was, "Where's mommy? Will you announce mommy's identity too?" Mu Yaja said bluntly, "Now is not the time." Yu knew what he was thinking too. The tacit understanding between father and son was often enough for them to understand each other's thoughts with just a glance or a word. The reason why he had agreed to come back was because he hoped that he could have a legitimate identity. At least in the outside world, he could calmly tell those people that Mu Yaja was his daddy and he didn't need to worry about anything. He also didn't need to bear the shameful title of an illegitimate child. However, he knew very well that his arrival might not be welcomed by the Mu family. With one look, it was indeed the case. "Daddy, put me down," Yu whispered. Mu Yaja glanced at him, then bent down and placed him on the ground. Mu Linfeng glanced at Yu, only to see the child turn around and face them without any fear. His small hands were obediently behind his back, and a confident and arrogant smile suddenly appeared on his exquisite face. He was dressed in a well-ironed suit, looking elegant and polite, which made him look like a mature gentleman. Chapter 1696. That pair of pure and beautiful eyes slowly sized them up. Then she smiled slightly. Uncles, aunts, good evening." He was the first to speak. His voice was not loud, but he did not try to hide it either. He was calm and composed, and no one could tell that he was only 7 years old from his calm demeanor. A normal child of this age would probably hide behind his father shyly in the face of so many stern and unfriendly elders. What about him? Not only did he not avoid them, he even took the initiative to greet them. His speech was clear, neither servile nor overbearing, and his bearing was extraordinary. Perhaps, it was not appropriate to describe a child as having an extraordinary bearing. Still, the child's wisdom and maturity surprised Mu Linfeng a little. Mu Shumin snorted and turned his face to the side as if he did not want to acknowledge his greeting. Mu Yanqing, on the other hand, did not want to acknowledge him as well. He merely quietly sized up this child who had appeared out of nowhere, his eyes full of judgment. Yun Tianyu scanned his surroundings, but no one dared to speak. The rules involved in this were very strict. Since Mu Shumin and Mu Linfeng did not speak, no one else dared to speak first. In terms of seniority and status, Mu Linfeng was the one with the highest authority. Even though he was not the family head, everyone was in awe of him. Mu Linfeng glanced at the child and then at Mu Yaja before asking, "Yaja, what do you mean by this?" Mu Sheng, who was sitting at the side, did not speak. He remained silent from start to finish. Mu Yaja's lips curled, but his smile was not deep. He carried Yu, walked forward and sat on the main seat, right next to Mu Linfeng. All the intimacy he displayed toward Yu was, at the same time, a covert declaration to everyone that Yu was rather important to him. "Today I've gathered all of you here to make an announcement." Mu Yaja paused and looked around before speaking again. This time he enunciated each word clearly. "This child, Mu Yaja, from now on, be it in the Mu family or outside, will be my son. No matter who it is, I don't want to hear anyone slander or belittle him. In addition, as the head of the Mu family, I'm announcing that Yun Tianyu will be the next successor of the Mu group." Speaking slowly was not his style. He was used to being swift and decisive, to the point and to the point. However, he spoke especially slowly today, almost word by word, so that everyone present could hear him clearly. After these words were spoken, everyone present was extremely shocked. This was especially so for Mu Shumin and Mu Linfeng. Their faces turned ashen in an instant. They thought that Mu Yaja would, at most, announce Yu's identity. Instead, he actually announced that Yu would be the next successor of the Mu group. This surprised everyone. Mu Shumin felt the threat from the intruder, and a sense of crisis arose in his heart. What was Mu Yaja thinking? How could he acknowledge an illegitimate son as his successor? Was he not being too hasty? Mu Linfeng questioned, "What do you mean by that? Successor? Don't you think you're being too hasty by making a decision so early?" "What? What is second uncle questioning my decision?" Chapter 1697. Mu Linfeng's tone took a step back. He knew that he had no right to ask such a question. The Mu family was like an ancient royal family, where all decisions were made by the head of the family. Regardless of right or wrong, they could only obey. Seniority was seniority. Power was power. Even though Mu Linfeng was his elder, Mu Yaja was now the family head, so he had no right to question his words. It was just that Mu Yaja could not interfere with his decision. Mu Linfeng did not approve of Yu from the bottom of his heart. Hence, even though he did not say anything, his expression was still unpleasant. Yu saw this and snorted inwardly. He did not care whether Mu Linfeng approved of him or not. This included everyone present. Mu Shumin gritted his teeth with hatred in his heart. His face was ashen. After a moment of silence, she said, "Yaja, let's not talk about whether we approve of this child or not for the time being. Just like what your second uncle said, isn't it too hasty to appoint a successor so soon? The successor of the Mu family isn't something you can appoint just because you want to. You have to see if this child is worthy of the title and if he is outstanding enough." As soon as she finished speaking, Yu looked at her. However, his gaze deepened in an instant. "Daddy, how should I address this person?" Mu Yaja replied, "According to seniority, you should call her grandaunt." He smiled slightly and asked politely yet sharply, "Hello, grandaunt. May I ask what kind of criteria are used to determine the successor's qualifications?" Mu Shumin was momentarily at a loss for words. Yu smiled and sat on Mu Yaja's lap with a slightly gloomy expression. "It seems that I'm not very popular in this family. However, I'm not here for anyone's approval. Neither is it for the status of the Mu family's successor. Whether you approve or not, it has nothing to do with me." Looking at their faces, it was as if his appearance would threaten their interests. Indeed, the Mu family's internal interests are very tied up. Everyone was like a lion, ambitiously protecting their own territory. Facing the invaders, they were all eyeing them covetously. A threat. That would depend on whether or not he cared about the inheritance of the Mu family. He was very happy that his father had chosen him as his successor. At the very least, his father approved of him. However, this did not mean that he would accept the right of inheritance. Yu sat there with a frightening maturity and a frightening aura around him. Even though he was just a child, he gave off an intimidating aura. Forgetting his age, I revere him from the bottom of my heart. Mu Linfeng snapped back to his senses, feeling a little embarrassed. Just now, he was actually intimidated by a child. Outrageous. Yu, let's have some tea with the elders. Muyaja took care of her. At this moment, a servant came over with a cup of tea. Disdain was disdain, but the rules still had to be set. Under Muyaja's lead, Yu served tea to the elders in an orderly manner. Mu Sheng received the tea from him and placed his trembling hand on the back of the boy's hand. With a smile he said, Yu, welcome home. He really liked Yu and had high hopes for him. When he grew up he might not be inferior to Muyaja at all. He was not worried about the ostracism of the rest of the family. Chapter 1698. Thank you, great-grandpa. Yu sweetly thanked him. Since Mu Sheng had accepted his offer of tea, the rest of them naturally had no right to reject it. When Yu walked up to his uncle with a cup of tea in his hand, he looked up and saw the old man and the young man exchanging glances with each other. Yu knew very well that Mu Linfeng did not approve of him. What about him, though? He did not approve of this uncle-in-law either. Even if he did not approve of him, the tea had to be offered. This was a rule that must be followed. Uncle-in-law, please have some tea. Yu smiled and presented the tea in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. Mu Shumin stared nervously at Mu Linfeng, only to see him reach out to accept the tea offered by Yu. The corners of his mouth twitched as he tried his best to suppress his anger. Was he going to accept the cup of tea? Second brother? She anxiously called out to him only to receive a warning look from him. She hurriedly lowered her head and dared not say another word. Yin Tianyu. Is that your name? Yu nodded and looked at him with smiling eyes. It's a good name. Mu Linfeng gave an ambiguous reply. He then took a sip of the tea and put it aside. His face, though, remained sullen from start to finish. After 2 rounds of toasting, both Mu Sheng and Mu Linfeng had accepted the tea, so the rest could not say anything else. When Yu offered the tea to Mu Shumin's face twitched. He tried his best to soothe the discomfort in his chest and forced himself to accept the tea calmly. He took a sip and hurriedly put it aside. The rest of the process proceeded smoothly. Muyaja led him, and like a lion cub who had just inherited a territory, he followed his footsteps closely as he patrolled his territory. After going through the rules once, Yu stood in the middle of the main hall and bowed 3 times to each elder. Following that, he straightened his back. Calm and composed, he looked like a wise leader. It was impossible not to look at him in a different light. A smile flashed across the pair of black eyes that were like agates. Mu Linfeng's heart was suddenly shaken. This child would definitely have an extraordinary future. He felt a sense of crisis. On the way back, Yu, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, could not hold back his laughter any longer and started giggling. Muyaja was affected by his laughter too, as his thin lips could not help curling into a playful smile. Daddy, did you see Mu's expression? He looked pale the whole time. He was looking at me as if I was an invader. Then he tilted his head. That was fun. Yu, from today onward, you are my legitimate son. No one will bully you in the future. Muyaja promised. Daddy, since I've entered the Mu family, should I change my surname? Yu suddenly asked. Muyaja cocked a brow. What? Don't you want to change it? Mu Tianyu? Yin Tianyu smiled. This name doesn't sound good to me. I don't want to change it, is that okay? He then looked at him with a gentle smile. This surname has been with me for 7 years. I've been following Mommy's surname since I was born. My surname is Mommy's and I don't want to change it. Yin Tianyu sounded better. More importantly, this name was given to him by his mommy. Chapter 1699. According to the rules, you should change your surname. Muyaja paused, then smiled helplessly. But I'll leave it to you to decide whether you want to change it or not. Daddy, you're the best. Yu smiled contentedly. She held Muyaja's arm and leaned forward to give him a peck. Daddy, don't worry. I won't let you down. He would become stronger. He would become so strong that no one would dare to underestimate him. No one would dare to underestimate his mommy. He told himself that he wouldn't have to wait too long for this day to come. On the other hand, the Mu family was in an uproar. Mu Shumin was furious. He slammed the table and threw a tantrum, not caring about Mu Linfeng's face at all. Second brother, are you really going to acknowledge this child as your own? He's a bastard and the woman behind him is very ambitious. In my opinion this time, that woman must be fanning the flames behind the child's return to the Mu family. She probably wants to return to the Mu family to seize power. When the child returns to the Mu family, the day she enters the Mu family's door will not be far away. This woman is really playing a big game of chess. I think this was her idea from the beginning to the end. Once that boy enters the Mu family and stabilizes his foundation, Won't she be able to ascend to the top and enjoy glory and wealth forever? Second brother, are you really going to sit back and do nothing? No matter how angry Mu Shumin was, Mu Linfeng remained silent in his seat. His expression was cold and it was obvious that he was unhappy. Second brother, why aren't you saying anything? Mu Shumin said angrily, don't you think I'm right? Mu Linfeng slammed the table and stood up angrily. Do you think I'm the one who came up with this? You should stop talking. I don't have a clue about this matter at the moment, so I can't say anything. As he spoke, Mu Linfeng paced back and forth in the main hall with his hands behind his back. Mu Yanqing and Mu Shumin watched him nervously, holding their breaths. In the end, he stopped in his tracks and slowly said, but there is something I want to say. It's easy for this child to enter the Mu family, but it's not that easy to stabilize the foundation. With his words, Mu Shumin was finally relieved. He smiled to ease the atmosphere. When Yu returned home, Yun Shishir was still on set. Xiao Yiqin ran over. When he saw Yu, his face lit up with anticipation. Yu, how was it? What do you mean? Xiao Yiqin was stunned. He glanced at Mu Yaja and then at Yu. Didn't Daddy say that he would bring you back to the Mu family today to officially announce your identity? It's just a process. There's nothing much to say. Mu Yaja didn't know whether to laugh or cry at his little adult demeanor. This child was truly a classic example of a little mischievous child. All right, go to sleep. Mu Yaja coaxed the two little fellows back to their room. Under Xiao Yichen's persistent pestering, he read 2 more stories before the little fellows fell asleep contentedly. When Yun Shishir returned home, Mu Yaja was in the study. She walked in and knocked on the door. Mu Yaja asked without looking up, "Are you done filming?" No, if he hadn't mentioned it she wouldn't have thought of it. When he opened his mouth, she suddenly walked to his side and said with a strange expression, "Everyone on set treated me strangely today. I'm feeling a little creepy because of it." Chapter 1700. Strange? Mu Yaja couldn't help but laugh when he heard this. How so? It's an indescribable feeling. It's like, their attitude towards me has changed drastically overnight. Following that, she gave him a rough description of the situation in the production team. It turned out that in the past, most of the people in the crew would prioritize Lin Ji and Hua Jin. After all, they were the 2 main leads. Hence, those with more scenes would film first. Whether it was the makeup artist, the stylist, or the stylist, the order was always Hua Jin first, followed by Lin Ji and then the supporting roles. Hence, Yun Shishir's scenes were especially slow. Sometimes there were 2 scenes prepared for the day, one for Lin Ji and the other for Yun Shishir. Lin Ji would film first, and Yun Shishir would do her makeup and styling in advance. She would wait for Lin Ji's scenes to finish before going on set. After filming there would be a break. This was for the director and a few crew members to take a breather. This delay could take up to an hour. Sometimes Lin Ji's scenes would not be completed if Lin Ji's scenes were slow. If she was unlucky, Lin Ji's scenes would take an entire day, and Lin Ji would have to wait until the next day to film. Hence, in that half a month, even though the schedule was tight, she had very little time to film. The real time was spent waiting for the set and memorizing her lines. Since she had nothing to do while waiting for the set, she memorized the script over and over again until she knew it by heart. However, this kind of filming was too boring. But for some reason when she arrived at the set today, the stylist, makeup, costume and props all rushed up to her. Not only were they attentive to her, but they also wanted her to do everything first. After that, what made her even more speechless was that the order was completely reversed. In the past she was the one waiting for Lin Ji. Now it was Lin Ji's turn to wait for her. Lin Ji was so angry that she glared and questioned the crew members about why they allowed Yun Shishir to film first. The latter replied that it was the director's orders and they were just following orders. In a fit of anger, Lin Ji went to argue with Gu Xiaoyang, but in the end he came back dejectedly. But because of this, no one said that Yun Shishir had special privileges. Everyone became friendly to her. She started with the makeup. She would film the scene first. However, what made her better than Lin Ji was that she had memorized the script very well, her emotions were on point, and her acting skills were even better. Basically, everything went smoothly after she started acting. She passed the first scene with very few NGs. Even if she did, she would always pass the second scene. Director Gu was very satisfied. Yun Shishir was very efficient. Within a day she completed all 3 scenes on one set. Director Gu was overjoyed and gave her another 2 days off. On the way back, Yun Shishir still felt a little incredulous. So she asked, "Did you inform the production crew?" "Yes." Mu Yaja didn't hide anything and nodded. "Doesn't it feel good to have special privileges?" Special privileges? This was a privilege. The way the supporting roles looked at her was different. They were looking at her suspiciously and sizing her up. What did you say to Director Gu? I don't need to say anything. Muyaja raised his eyebrows. I've never seen him before. Then why did he? Chapter 1701. Muyaja suddenly said something meaningful. Yun Shirshir's face turned even redder when she heard that. Actually, there's no need for special privileges. This way, it's inevitable that there will be rumors. You don't have to care about other people's feelings. Muyaja smiled faintly. The reason why I'm doing this is because I hope that you can spend more time with me. You don't have to worry too much. Yun Shirshir's heart softened. She suddenly went forward and hugged him. I'm sorry. I also feel that ever since I accepted this role, I don't have much time to accompany you. It's good that you have this awareness. Yun Shirshir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She hugged his shoulders and said coquettishly, but I realized something. Hubby, I think that having special privileges feels pretty good. You didn't see how those staff members who used to give me the cold shoulder and gave me the cold shoulder are trying to please me today. It's so funny. Thank you, hubby. As she spoke, Yun Shirshir planted a kiss on his cheek. Muyaja obviously enjoyed this kiss. However, he still had to maintain a cold and calm look on his face. He even asked, Is that enough to thank me? Yun Shirshir pouted. What else do you want? Muyaja furrowed his eyebrows. He didn't smile, but his slender fingers tapped on his lips gently. He looked at her meaningfully. Yun Shirshir's eyes were smiling. She hit his shoulders coquettishly and leaned closer to his face. Her soft lips touched the corner of his mouth. At this moment, the sound of slippers on the floor could be heard from outside the door. Immediately after, Yu pushed the door open and entered the room. He rubbed his eyes and asked, Daddy, when is Mommy coming back? His voice stopped abruptly when he saw the ambiguous scene in the study. Yu stared blankly at Yun Shirshir, who was nestled in Muyaja's arms and kissing him tenderly. Then she looked at Muyaja, who had a stunned look on his face. Her mouth suddenly gaped open in shock. Then he suddenly raised his hand and covered his eyes. Wow. Daddy. Mommy. I didn't see anything. I didn't see Mommy sitting in Daddy's arms and kissing Daddy's mouth. I didn't even see it. With that, he turned around and ran back to his room. Yun Shirshir abruptly left Muyaja's lips and rubbed her lips awkwardly, which were still stained with the residual warmth of the man's thin lips. Before she could react, she heard Yu's footsteps outside the door. He appeared at the door with his hands clasped behind his back and his head lowered. He was obviously embarrassed. I forgot to mention it. Good night, Daddy. Good night, Mommy. You guys can continue. With that, he reached out to close the door and ran back to the bedroom. Yun Shirshir, Muyaja, what could be more embarrassing than being seen by a child while they were being intimate? Yun Shirshir thought about Yu's shocked expression and his ambiguous gaze on the two of them. She felt so embarrassed that her cheeks burned. She felt a little ashamed. At this moment, she really wanted to dig a hole in the ground and bury her burning face. Muyaja pulled her back into his embrace unhappily and teasingly asked, What's wrong? Not continuing? If the child sees us being intimate, won't it be a bad example? Chapter 1702. She was worried that Yu would see it and it would be a bad influence. A bad example? How could that be? Muyaja laughed and said, Kids these days are all smart. They know a lot. As he said that, he hugged her and smiled. Don't think too much, let's continue. Yun Shirshir pushed his chest, but there was a hint of wanting to say something. As he kissed her, the temperature in the study room rose. The date of the engagement was set. Yun Shirshir was looking forward to the engagement, but she was also nervous and uneasy. Muyaja said that the engagement ceremony did not need to be too grand. As for the guests, he would only invite some of his important relatives and friends, as well as his frequent business partners, as VIPs to bear witness. As for the female guests, they would be invited by her. Yun Shirshir thought for a long time and finally decided to give Gong Jia a call. Sister. Gong Jia's handsome and magnetic voice came from the other end of the line. Gong Jia had called her a few days ago, but at that time she was busy dealing with Yun Yeho's matter. Now that she thought about it, she had not seen him for a long time. Sister, have you been busy recently? Gong Jia asked. Yun Shirshir pondered for a moment and smiled. Xiao Jia, I have something to tell you. Are you free now? What is it? Tell me. It's not convenient to talk over the phone. How about this? Are you free now? I'll treat you to a cup of coffee. Gong Jia gladly agreed. They agreed to meet at the dessert shop that she frequented. Gong Jie had already booked a private room. He sat by the window about 100 meters away. His secret guards were stationed there to prevent any suspicious people from getting in. When Yun Shishir arrived, he had already ordered a cup of her favorite Blue Mountain coffee. When she walked past him, he had already noticed her and looked up. "You're here." He seemed to especially like windbreakers, especially snow-white windbreakers. With his silver hair and tall figure, it was impossible not to recognize him in a crowd. There was a lit cigarette between his fingers, but when he saw her, he calmly put it out. He remembered that she didn't like the smell of smoke and she hated smoking even more. Therefore, smoking in front of her was forbidden. He had promised her that he wouldn't smoke, but he was addicted to smoking, so he took advantage of the time when she wasn't there to secretly smoke a cigarette. Who would have thought that just as he lit it, he would arrive? Gong Jie's face had a touch of embarrassment from being caught red-handed. He cleared his throat and smiled, trying to cover it up. "Xiao Jie, you're smoking again." "I was wrong." He revealed his watery eyes and acted cute and coquettishly in front of her. It was an easy task. Yun Shishir was helpless. She sat down in the booth and looked at the dessert he ordered for her. She couldn't help but be surprised. "How do you know what I like?" "The last time we had afternoon tea together, these were the desserts. I remember them all." He remembered every detail about her. Her favorite desserts, coffee, snacks, he remembered them all. Yun Shishir smiled warmly and was touched by his thoughtfulness. Gong Jie gazed at her tenderly, barely concealing the adoration in his eyes. He took a sip of his coffee and asked, "Sis, I was overseas a while ago. I've brought you a small gift when I return this time." As he spoke, he placed an exquisitely wrapped gift box in front of her. Yun Shishir was a little surprised. "Gift? What gift?" Chapter 1703. Yun Shishir was a little surprised. "Gift? What gift?" Gong Jie rested his chin on his hand lazily and winked at her. "Open it and take a look." "Okay." Yun Shishir carefully opened the gift and saw that it was an extremely exquisite Omega watch. Compared to men's mechanical watches, women's watches were gentle and reserved. However, the ring of diamonds on the watch face was luxurious. Omega watches were expensive, and custom-made ones were even more expensive. To Yun Shishir, this gift was obviously too expensive. "Is it very expensive?" Yun Shishir knitted her brows. She obviously didn't want him to spend so much money. Gong Jie's handsome brows raised slightly, but he couldn't help but laugh. "Sis, do you still remember? This watch is the gift I promised to give you." Just as he finished speaking, Yun Shishir suddenly remembered that there was a reason for this watch. When Yun Shishir was young, she had an Omega watch. It was Mu Wanru's watch that she always wore. She liked it very much, so her mother gave it to her and let her wear it. She had always cherished this watch and couldn't bear to break it. In her heart, it was a rare treasure. However, there was once when Gong Jie secretly took the watch that she hid in the drawer out to play. In the end, he accidentally lost it. He felt guilty, so he didn't dare to mention it. When Yun Shishir couldn't find her watch and cried sadly, he helplessly hugged her in his arms. He was both regretful and helpless. He could only coax her and say, "Shishir, don't cry. When I have money in the future, I'll definitely give you the best watch in the world." Only then did she stop crying and say, "This is what you promised me. You can't go back on your words." Even though it had been a long time, so long that even she had forgotten about it, he didn't forget. This time he went overseas to escort a batch of goods out to sea. When he returned to Europe, he bought this watch. For the Gong Jie of today, the value of a watch did not depend on how expensive it was, but on whether she liked it or not. As for Yun Shishir, whether she liked it or not didn't matter what brand or price it was. As long as it was a gift from him, she would like it. Yun Shishir held the box and looked at the watch lying inside. She liked it very much and her face was full of satisfaction. Gong Jie smiled. When he saw her smiling eyes staring at the watch, he knew very well that she liked it. Thus he said gently, "Come, I'll put it on for you." Then he picked up the watch and adjusted it. Then he gently lifted her wrist and carefully put the watch on her wrist. Gong Jie lowered his head and seriously adjusted the buckle for her. Yun Shishir laughed and said, "I was just joking at that time. I just didn't expect you to remember. I thought you forgot." "How could I forget? I will remember what I promised you." Gong Jie paused and looked up. His eyes seemed to be filled with countless stars. When he smiled, his eyes curved and looked extremely beautiful. "I still remember that I promised you that if you got married, I would personally hand your hand to that man." Yun Shishir's expression suddenly froze. She couldn't help but look up and stare deeply at him. However, at this moment, she saw that he had already lowered his head and was adjusting the time for her. Shao Jia, if I get married, will you give me your blessings? She asked carefully. Chapter 1704. He raised his head and looked at her with a strange expression. For a moment, too many emotions flashed across his eyes. She could not see anything clearly. Sis, are you getting married? Gong Jia's handsome brows furrowed slightly, but he looked a little dazed. Yun Shirshir saw that his expression was a little strange, and she could not help but be a little surprised. What's wrong, Shao Jia? Nothing. Gong Jia came back to his senses from his complicated thoughts. He looked up and exchanged glances with her. His handsome eyes suddenly deepened. You're getting married? Yes. Yes. Why so sudden? I've never heard you mention it before. Yun Shirshir tugged at the corner of her lips and smiled awkwardly. Previously, I didn't tell you because I didn't know how to bring it up. Moreover, the wedding date hasn't been set yet. We're only planning to hold the engagement ceremony first. As she spoke, she reached out and placed her hand on the back of his hand. Smiling gently, she said, "This is what I wanted to talk to you about. Shao Jia, will you attend my engagement ceremony? Will you give me your blessings?" Gong Jia suddenly felt a little frustrated. However, this frustration did not show on his face. Gong Jia lowered his eyelids as many fragmented memories flashed through his mind. The nightmarish memories of his youth resurfaced in his mind. Those memories, accompanied by the firelight, seemed to break out of a cocoon in an instant. For a moment, the space between his brows throbbed with a splitting headache. Gong Jia rubbed the space between his brows a little anxiously, looking a little conflicted and anxious. Suddenly he asked, "Do you really want my blessings?" "Of course," Yun Shirshir said matter-of-factly, "because you're my most important relative in this world. Of course, it's very important to be able to receive your blessings." Gong Jia sucked in a deep breath of cold air before replying calmly, "You asked me if I'll give you my blessings, but my answer depends on who you've chosen." Yun Shirshir was stunned. She sensed that there was a deeper meaning in his words. Gong Jia narrowed his eyes, but his voice was slightly colder. "Just who is he? What? Who is the man you married?" Yun Shirshir laughed dryly. "Is it important who he is?" Gong Jia abruptly interrupted her. His voice was soft but heavy. "That man is Muyaja, isn't he?" Yun Shirshir was stunned and looked at him in disbelief. "How did you know?" Gong Jia clenched his fists but didn't answer the question directly. Instead, he said firmly, "If it's this man, then my answer is no." Yun Shirshir widened her eyes in shock. His answer was so unexpected that for a moment, she even suspected that she had misheard him. "I'm sorry. There's only one thing I can't do." Gong Jia was afraid that she didn't hear him clearly, so he repeated, "If you want to be with this man, I'm sorry, I can't do it." Yun Shirshir seemed to have lost her voice at that moment. She was stunned for a long time before she asked in a daze, "Why?" "Because I hate the Mu family." The last 4 words were said with gritted teeth. At the mention of the Mu family, Gong Jia's handsome eyes were filled with unconcealable hatred. Chapter 1705. Gong Jia said, "Sis, do you know? The Gong and Mu families have an irreconcilable feud between them. If not for Mu Sheng, Mother wouldn't have died in the fire that day. That man is the cruelest executioner. He caused Mother's death and indirectly caused you to wander about, causing us to be separated for 15 years. He suddenly grabbed her wrist forcefully. Unlike his usual elegance and nobility, the hand that held her wrist contained a terrifying amount of strength. Yun Shirshir forgot to dodge or struggle as she stared at him in shock. 15 years? How many 15 years do we have in life? We should have been together forever and never been separated. It's all his fault, he's the real culprit. Don't you hate him?" Yun Shirshir blurted out, "I do." "You hate him?" "Of course I hate him." Yun Shirshir sounded agitated. "Of course, I know that he's the culprit behind Mother's death. He can't escape punishment. No matter how I persuade myself, I can't forgive him. I can't forgive him for the rest of my life." Pausing for a moment, she suddenly sighed, her voice filled with exhaustion. She held her forehead, her eyes filled with sadness. "But this is already the grudge of the previous generation. Must I hold on to the past and not let it go? Aren't you the one who's holding on to the past and not letting it go?" Gong Jia was a little overbearing. "You've never admitted your Gong bloodline. Aren't you also holding on to the past and not letting it go? I want to bring you back to the Gong family, but you don't want to." "What?" Yun Shirshir's eyes were filled with determination. "I'm not from the Gong family." "You are." Gong Jia was a little angry at her double standard. "The blood of the Gong family flows in your veins. You're the Gong family's young mistress. No matter how long you've been away from home, you can't hide the fact that you're from the Gong family. Xiao Jie, then give me a reason. Tell me, why are you unwilling to acknowledge the Gong family? Yun Shishir was shocked and angry. She had never seen such a terrible Gong Jie. He grabbed her hand and didn't let go. His words were sharp. Say it. Father has always hoped to find you. Now that he has found you, why don't you acknowledge him? Since you said that the Gong and Muyaja families have a deep grudge against each other, then if you let me reunite with that man, he will definitely not let me be together with Muyaja. I was afraid, so I didn't want to acknowledge him. She suddenly broke down, tears welling up in her eyes. Gong Jie pursed his thin lips and frowned deeply, but he was speechless for a moment. But, what does the feud between the Gong and Mu families have to do with him? I love him. He has never done anything wrong. He protects me, cherishes me, and makes me feel that I am not alone in this world. He always appears when I need him the most and protects me behind him. Even if I cause trouble, I'm willful and I'm unreasonable, he will still accept me unconditionally. Yun Shishir took a deep breath and said, I love him, but I know that if I reunite with my biological father, he will definitely not sit back and do nothing. But he's our father. You shouldn't give up on reuniting with him for a man. Chapter 1706. Gong Jie was stunned. He frowned but did not say anything. Yun Shishir slowly fell back into her seat. She lowered her head and her shoulders trembled slightly. Gong Jie said in a low voice, Sister, give up. Leave him, okay. Sister, it's impossible between you and him. Gong Jie sat down and placed his warm palm on the back of her hand. Come back to the Gong family with me. I'll make you understand that you deserve someone better. What's better? Yun Shishir looked up and was puzzled. Xiao Jie, tell me what's the best. I can't answer you. You can't answer me because you've never loved anyone. Gong Jie was even more speechless. Indeed, in all these years he had never loved anyone. What was love? He did not understand. He did not understand why they had to get married. Why did they have to stay together for the rest of their lives? To him, women were just a vague and unfathomable existence. He's the best in my heart. No one can replace him. Gong Jie frowned. Are you sure he truly loves you? If he loves you, why did he not announce your marriage after acknowledging you Yu's identity? Yun Shishir was shocked. Then anger flashed in her eyes. Are you investigating me? Gong Jie's face froze. How do you know so much? Yun Shishir asked aggressively, Xiao Jie, what do you do for a living? How do you know so much about some things? You told me that you have a company. What company is it? Gong Jie hesitated for a moment and said slowly, if you're willing to come back to the Gong family with me, I'll be honest with you. Honest? Yun Shishir's eyes suddenly turned cold. So, you've been hiding it from me all this time? Gong Jie, you actually hid the truth from me? Xiao Jie, I trusted you a lot, but why did you lie to me? Yun Shishir felt hurt and asked in disbelief, what are you hiding from me? She felt a chill in her heart. She had been looking forward to receiving her brother's heartfelt blessings for this meeting. However, what did he get in return? He actually hid it from her. I didn't. There are some things that I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to hurt you. You hurt me and then you tell me that I don't want to hurt you? Don't these words sound a little pompous? Yun Shishir took a deep breath. I trusted you and was willing to tell you everything, but you hid a lot of things from me. Good. Since you said that you trust me and are willing to tell me everything, then let me ask you. Gong Jie suddenly got up, held her shoulder, deep handsome eyes condensed her, not allowing her eyes to have a trace of room to dodge. What happened when you were 18 years old? Yun Shishir froze as if she had been struck by lightning. He asked her what happened when she was 18 years old? But how should she answer him? How should she answer this question? Chapter 1707. Gong Jie paused for a moment and said, Sis, since I've found you, I have many ways to investigate your past. But I don't want to. I want you to tell me personally. Now tell me what happened when you were 18 years old. You had a child out of wedlock at 18 years old. This shouldn't have happened. Why did it happen to you? He suddenly asked suspiciously, did he? No. Yun Shishir suddenly interrupted him. It's not what you think. Don't let your imagination run wild. Then answer me. Gong Jie was a little nervous and uneasy. Just tell me what happened, okay? The child was born from a surrogate. Gong Jie couldn't react for a moment. Yun Shishir felt greatly humiliated. In fact, she had never regretted the decision she had made that year. That was because the surrogacy incident had coincidentally brought her the most precious gift in her life. Yu was like the most precious gift God had given her. Therefore, no matter how humiliating it was to talk about it, she still didn't regret it. If she were 18 years old again, she would probably make the same decision again. However, even though she didn't regret it, for a woman like her to say it herself, it was inevitable that she would feel embarrassed. Therefore, when she said that the child was born from a surrogate pregnancy, Gong Jie was puzzled and didn't understand for a moment. Or rather, it could be said that he didn't think in that direction. It wasn't until he coldly repeated the word surrogacy twice in his heart that he suddenly realized what was going on. Surrogate pregnancy? He tried his best to lower his voice and asked her back, "Is that what you mean by surrogate pregnancy?" After a pause, he lowered his voice again. "What? Why did you do this?" Suddenly, he thought of something and his voice suddenly became cold. "Who forced you to do this?" "No one." Yun Shishir explained, "No one forced me. I did it willingly." When Gong Jie heard this, he was so angry that he was at a loss for words. Then he said bitterly, "Why did you do this? Why did he have to ruin himself like this?" A girl who was as delicate as a flower at the age of 18 had become a surrogate mother for a strange man, gave birth to 2 children, and became a mother at such a young age. Why would such a ridiculous thing happen to her? Gong Jie was still in disbelief. Under his doubtful gaze, Shishir quickly regained her calm and rational expression. Slowly, pretending to be calm, she told him the whole story of what happened 18 years ago. She tried her best to be concise and comprehensive. She skipped over some insignificant chapters and explained the reason why she had made this decision to him from beginning to end. She had been mistreated in the orphanage since she was 9 years old, and her identity had been swapped. Ever since she was adopted by the Yun family, Yun Yeqing had treated her like his own daughter and doted on her. Ever since the Yun family went bankrupt, she had been forced to make a living. She also had a sense of responsibility. In order to share the Yun family's debt, she had made this decision on a whim. She had been pregnant for 8 months and had given birth prematurely. One child was born healthy and was taken away. The other child was born without breathing. Due to a freak combination of factors, she had raised them by her side. She recounted everything in detail. Chapter 1708. I know that you might not understand why I made such a ridiculous decision. But I have no other choice. Do you know? I really can't just sit back and do nothing. The year the Yun family went bankrupt was also the coldest winter in history. The reason why she made such an unconventional decision was that she had witnessed the loan sharks knocking on her door time and time again. Those bloody threats, as well as the insolence with daggers, had forced the family to stand on the 13th floor's rooftop and threaten Yun Yeqing to repay the debt on the spot. If he could not do so within an hour, he would be pushed down by one of them. Yun Na was so scared that she wet her pants on the spot. She cried her heart out, but no one cared about her. Yun Yeqing kowtowed to each family and begged until his head bled. Only then did he manage to scrape together enough interest to send these demons of plague away. Another time, the debt collection company had dragged her into the snow and poured a basin of ice water over her head. It was -5 degrees Celsius, and the bone-chilling cold seeped into her bones from every pore. She was so cold that she shivered and fainted on the spot. When she woke up, Yun Yeqing was covered in injuries. It seemed that he had been taught a lesson by those lawless people. Because of that incident, there was a heavy chill in her body. Even now her body was still weak. Not only that, she even witnessed with her own eyes how her father was dragged to the neighborhood's fountain. In the cold weather, they grabbed his hair and pressed him into the icy fountain, causing his face to turn red from the cold. How could she just sit back and do nothing? How could she pretend that it was none of her business? She only resorted to this when she was at her wit's end. If she did not think of a solution at that time, the Yun family would really be finished. Yun Shishir lowered her head heavily. Her hands fell limply on the table, and her fingers were intertwined with each other. She felt lonely and helpless. The wounds that had already scabbed over were once again torn open with blood dripping from them. The pain was heart-wrenching. She originally did not want to recall those nightmarish scenes. Gong Jie looked at her isolated and helpless appearance and felt as if his heart had been ruthlessly torn open. The pain was so painful that it numbed him. "I'm sorry, sister." Gong Jie sat beside her helplessly, hugged her shoulders and hugged her tightly. His heart was filled with regret. He was so stupid and made her angry again. Ever since they were young, he always seemed to make her angry. But he didn't want to. "I'm sorry." He apologized sincerely again and again. His bewildered look was like a child who had done something wrong. He was trembling with fear and had a hint of a spoiled child. Yun Shishir's heart softened under his comforting words. She softened her tone and said, Xiao Jie, I've never wanted to hide anything from you. It's just that I really want to forget these things. But since you want to know, I'll be honest with you. Stop talking. Gong Jie stopped her in time. I know I was wrong. I shouldn't have forced you to think about these things. I shouldn't have reminded you of these things. As he spoke, he gently caressed her cheeks. His gentle voice was filled with guilt. Sister, I know I was wrong. Forgive me, okay? Then, will you come to my engagement ceremony? Yun Shishir asked, her eyes filled with anticipation. Gong Jie stared into her eyes for a moment, then replied, let me think about it, okay? Okay. I won't force you, but I also hope that you will be present at the most important moment of my life. Chapter 1709. Gong Jie's heart softened. Sis, there's one thing that won't change. Sis, I won't let you suffer anymore. If anyone bullies you, I'll be the first to return the favor. Yun Shishir was amused by his serious look. She did not know whether to laugh or cry as she said, as long as you don't cause trouble for me like when we were young, it'll be fine. Gong Jie defended himself aggrievedly, I'm not a child anymore. Yun Shishir smiled and said, but in my heart, you'll always be. She hugged his shoulders and patted his head gently, just like when they were young, when he hid under her blanket in fear at night and she comforted him. Xiao Jie, be good. Sis loves you. Gong Jie smiled in satisfaction and hugged her affectionately. Ever since she parted ways with Gong Jie that day, Yun Shishir had been feeling inexplicably uneasy. She did not know if Gong Jie would come to her engagement, nor did she know if he would accept her choice. However, once she had set her mind on someone, she would not change her mind even if her brother tried to stop her. In the past she was a little cowardly. When she encountered something, she would subconsciously escape and retreat. But this time she decided to face it bravely. No matter what, she would protect him silently in her own way. Now that the engagement date had been confirmed, she decided to shop around the mall during the break to choose a suit for Wuxia. Even though she knew that his suit would be prepared by someone. However, she decided to choose one for him personally. This time she was fully prepared. She wrapped herself up fully. Since the weather was turning cold, she wore a down jacket, a pair of black sunglasses, a cotton cap, and a mask. It was almost impossible to recognize her when she walked on the streets. Yun Shishir drove to the mall and went to the Armani counter. With Mushi's company, she began to choose a suit. After choosing a few suits, she asked the counter staff, but one of them did not have the size she wanted. It had to be said that Wuxia was too tall, so it was very suitable for the British, European, and American style. However, even if it was suitable, she would often encounter situations where the size was not available. Fortunately, the suit she liked the most was available in a size. I'll take these two. Can you give me the order? She picked 2 suits and handed them to the shop assistant. The shop assistant nodded and asked her to wait for a while before she went to make the order. While Yun Shishir was sitting on the sofa and waiting, an uninvited guest suddenly appeared at the counter. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of an extremely familiar figure. Her heart froze for a moment and she suddenly thought of a phrase, enemies often cross paths. Song Enya, who was dressed elegantly in a pair of 10-centimeter high heels, casually strolled into the counter. Song Yunshi's birthday was approaching, so she decided to choose a suit as a gift. However, there was such an unfortunate fate. As soon as Song Enya entered the counter, she saw the figure sitting quietly on the sofa and recognized Yun Shishir at first glance. Even though Yun Shishir was dressed very formally when she went out and was wrapped tightly from head to toe, her charm and temperament would not change no matter how well she dressed. In addition, Yun Shishir had long hair and a good figure. Even if she was wrapped in a thick down jacket, it was difficult to hide her exquisite figure. Chapter 1710. Yun Shishir. As soon as she opened her mouth, Yun Shishir's body stiffened. She knew that she could not hide from her sharp eyes. With a sinister smile, Song Enya walked up to her, stopped in her tracks and looked down at her condescendingly. What a coincidence. Are you shopping at the mall too? Yun Shishir ignored her. Song Enya ignored her cold and distant attitude and sneered as she sized her up from head to toe. What's that saying again? Enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road. Hee, I didn't expect to meet you today. This world is really small, there are B*cheese blocking your way everywhere you go. Yun Shishir's lips twitched a little. She wanted to say that too. This world is really small, there are irksome people everywhere you go. Just as the atmosphere turned cold, the salesperson at the counter came over with a list and greeted her respectfully. Madam, the list is ready. May I know if you'd like to pay by cash or card? I'll pay by card. Thank you, Yun Shishir said politely. With that, she stood up and, as if Song Enya was invisible, walked around her to the counter, and took out a card from her wallet. Just as the salesperson came over with the card machine, Song Enya sneered again. "You're buying a suit? Are you buying it to please Brother Mu?" Yun Shirshir continued to ignore her. Song Enya, however, did not seem to know what was good for her. It was as if she was trying her best to provoke her. "What? Do you think you can win Brother Mu's favor by buying a suit? Is this one of your tricks? You're so old-fashioned. If it were me, I wouldn't know this trick. Brother Mu doesn't like it." Yun Shirshir passed the card to the salesperson as if there was no one else around. The salesperson, however, was stunned by their exchange. Somehow, she felt that these two seemed to know each other and had a deep hatred for each other. Seeing that the salesperson was stunned, Yun Shirshir kindly reminded her, "Hello, please pay by card." As he spoke, he waved the card in his hand in front of her. Song Enya was infuriated to see Yun Shirshir ignoring her from the start to the end. However, she did not flare up on the spot for the sake of the situation. She took a deep breath and steadied herself. Then she said in a strange tone, "This card belongs to Brother Mu, right?" A certain someone was really shameless. She kept insisting that she was not a mistress. She was using Brother Mu's card and spending Brother Mu's money. She was clearly a mistress. How can you be so shameless? Her voice wasn't loud, but it wasn't soft either. It was loud enough for everyone